on my end, just in case. In Audacity.
Boobies. There you go, Tim.
You wait to see it recording, and then you say that.
Oh, yeah.
I know you do.
Dummy.
Well, welcome to episode 49 of the Current Gen podcast. This is part 4, the final section, unless things go horribly wrong, of our Game of the Year debates. We're going to talk about our favorite story of the year. We're going to debate and rank a list of best story in video games, and then best overall game. But we'll also sprinkle in a few smaller picks for some other categories here and there. But again, my name's Tim, here with Daniel, Kyle, and Jeff. Welcome back, fellas.
I'm plotting for
You
myself.
guys are just...
This is for me, not you guys.
You guys are
Okay.
you guys are gluttons for punishment, huh? You just keep coming back.
Just love.
This is what late night talk shows sound like now too. Like as Jimmy Fallon introduces a guest, it's like, welcome the great Dwayne Johnson, and then it's just him kind of like,
Quietly
it's just
clapping.
him standing there and smiling. Yeah.
doesn't
We
have the
get
same-
bigger
Let's
ovations
go.
than Dwayne Johnson. Tim just said
He
it,
did.
so
It's
yeah.
true.
Dwayne just has to go, yeah, how's it going? I'm massive. I'm too big for my webcam.
Yeah, I know. Seriously though, how is that guy that big?
He's just all shoulders, man. I don't know.
Yeah, he's big.
Smell what he's cooking.
Derek will be joining us shortly. We hope. We'll see. Some of you are like, good. We don't need him, but
Who's going to represent all the mediocre games
we need.
in the Game of the Year category?
It's true. It's true.
We'll call him.
We need Teague here. He's
Phone a friend. Yeah.
He is a mainstay. He's the foundation. He's the glue. All right, I'm done lying. Okay, so let's.
What kind of glue? Are we talking about sexual glue? Because yeah.
Is that a thing?
I
Okay,
don't- that sounds pretty big.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, that seems counterproductive.
that does not sound like a good.
yeah,
intention.
to what you want to be going on inside.
Hey, that sounds like a really great failed Shark Tank pitch.
I'm gonna pass.
And you know,
As soon as they
they
walk in,
stuck
like,
to each other
introduce it.
for 10 years or so. It's no big deal.
Have you ever been in an intimate moment with your partner and thought, why aren't we stuck together? Well,
Yeah.
we have the solution.
Do you love that movie with Matt Damon and Greg Kinnear where they're stuck together?
No one does.
No one.
And it's Matt Damon and Greg Kinnear pitching it. So, all right. Hey, by the way, we mentioned The Rock. We don't want The Rock. Just real quick before we get into best game stuff, admittedly, I was a 90s kid. Like, so 90s were when I was ages 8 through 18. So, like, that was my most formative years were all the 90s. One of the biggest pop culture things in the 90s was professional wrestling. So I really got big into WCW, WWF at the time before they had to change it.
Too, yeah.
Attitude era all day, man.
Yeah.
So I was into it big time. So I've been recently watching through, and admittedly it's not the best series, but on Peacock they have the Monday Night Wars documentary series that was on.
That stuff is so good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. If you were a fan of it back in, because I haven't watched it since 2003, maybe.
That's
Like
about when I quit. Yeah.
I kind of fell off, and I checked in every once in a while, but like, nah. So I don't know who most of the superstars are or have been. But the 90s, those are my times. Like the N64 games were my jam. I loved
Yeah,
No
I still
Mercy.
love them.
No
Yeah.
mercy.
Yeah, if they put No Mercy on the Switch, I would spend $100 on that. But anyway,
You heard it here first, Nintendo. Like,
but I've been watching through it, and admit they use a lot of the same clips and interview segments, which is a little annoying if you're binging it like I am.
Yeah.
Because you're like, wow, I've already seen half of this episode because they're just replaying repackaged clips of other interviews.
Yeah.
But it's still interesting, still entertaining. I love that stuff, man.
Especially if you live through that era, it's not really a big deal when they repeat content because you're like, oh yeah, I did love that part. So
It doesn't matter to me. Like when Sting had to pick which NWO faction to go to, or when Stone Cold finally found his personality. All that stuff is just so fun.
Yes.
The Stone Cold generation was my favorite.
Yeah,
That's Attitude Era. Yeah.
that's WCW
that
was
stuff.
beating the crap out of WWE there for a bit, and so then
a
all
long
of a sudden,
time. Yeah, like
Vince
2 years
McMahon,
or so. Yeah.
like, you know what? We need to take this a different direction. We're gonna up the ante. So anyway,
Man, did they ever. Those hardcore matches at that
Yeah.
time with like Hardcore
yeah.
Holly and all. Oh, man, that's like.
well, it's really cool to see
Foley
stories
and-
of like, Mick Foley's story is really cool. I have a lot of admiration for that guy.
Same
That guy
here.
was a
The
lunatic.
guy was like a failed like high school wrestler who just kept
Yep.
who just had so much heart and just kept on at it and
just kept
The
on
opposite
hurling
out.
his body off of the frickin' the cage at the top, just
Yeah,
diving on.
I get goosebumps when he talks about the story about that, and like
Yeah.
when he goes back
It
to
was with
backstage.
Undertaker, right?
Back up there.
Vince
Yeah.
goes, never do anything like that again, and Mick would he remembers saying in his head, he was just like, I probably will, and like it's just
Yeah.
He
it's
got
one of those
thrown off the
awesome
top.
stories that
Down on top of a table,
Yep.
and then as the match continues, is back up there again and gets choke slammed
Oh,
through the.
threw
the
it.
cage.
onto the mat.
Yeah, he gave his entire body to that. Were there attacks underneath that, or was that a different match?
No, that was tax. Tax were later in that same match.
in the same match. Okay.
Yeah. The cage. My understanding was, I mean, based on the stories, the cage top wasn't supposed to break when he was choking.
No, it wasn't.
So he just went through and hit the ring.
Yeah, when you watch the replay of it with his commentary, you can actually you can see, Undertaker isn't staring down at him like, take that. He's worried.
Yeah.
Oh
my God.
He's nervous that he just really hurt him.
Yeah.
Just one of the most legendary moments in like history. Not even
so fun. If you were a wrestling fan, that's worth grabbing at least a free trial of Peacock to.
There's actually more WWE stuff. Like their documentaries are really good. I highly recommend those, especially because a lot of dudes our age were watching it at the time that the documentaries are covering. But Peacock just acquired WWE's like Vault or whatever, their streaming service, their network.
Yeah.
So they're going to put a whole like bunch of content, and then WWE's exclusively going to be on Peacock only.
Yeah, they don't have a ton of them up yet, but they have some of them, and they're really.
It'll be March, I think, is the full rollout.
That's cool.
Oh, nice. So anyway,
I still watch. I'm a dork.
Wanted to share that, and the video game connection is that I spent so much time in WCW versus NWO Revenge. Loved that game.
Yes.
Yeah, same here.
And then, of course, No Mercy. Before that was WrestleMania 2000, which was a really good game. But then WWF No Mercy was like the peak of THQ wrestling games.
Yeah.
You can create your own wrestler, all your own customer.
You could go in the back. You go in the backstages and stuff like that.
Oh, it was so fun. Yeah. Oh man, as like teenage Tim was having the time of his life with those games. Yeah. But all right, moving on. Hey, let's talk about. Because I don't know if those games are actually good. I just know I love them. Those games might be 7 out of 10s objectively, but in my mind, they're 10 out of 10. You can't go wrong with those games. I don't care about the glitches or the problems or whatever. Perfect games. But when we think about games that we love, I don't care what everyone else rates them. That's where I like this idea that Dan came up with. Dan, why don't you give us the title of our first category we're going to do?
Well, thank you, Tim. I'm not going to take all the credit. Michael Huber from Easy Allies technically is the one that's sort of, I don't know if you want to coin this term, swimming in sevens. So basically, an average game that is not necessarily average to you, but Metacritic-wise is probably, the 6s or 7s there.
Yeah.
But
is there any rules? Like, we probably shouldn't pick something that's like universally critically acclaimed.
I mean, I didn't know if we were gonna look on. I actually was looking earlier on Metacritic just to see what actually fell within the 70s. So I had jotted down 3 of them.
So what I did for this was I think my highest rated one is an 80 on one platform and then 70s on the others.
Okay.
I'm still counting it because we're not really giving it love in the main conversation anyway. So
sure.
So anything for the most part 80 and below, I figured is fair game, but
60 to 80 range. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go below that if you want to, but
yeah, that's the whole point of it is like pumping up an underdog.
If in your heart it's fun but average, that's all that matters.
We gotta give a shout out to our buddy Thomas too, because I forget who one of you said. I don't think there's a game that's been made that Thomas didn't enjoy in some way, shape, or form. And I love that about that guy. I love that he's able to, because he's been talking about this new werewolf game and he's been posting about it, and I'm following those because I'm curious about this. And Jeff's playing it. Jeff doesn't like it at all, right?
It's like the most 5 out of 10 game I've ever played.
Well, it's got 56 as I think the highest Metacritic average that it has. But I love watching Thomas's post about these things because he admits like, hey, it shoots itself in the foot a bunch. It could be great, but it's just not. But I'm having fun with it. But he's mostly positive about every game he plays.
Yeah.
And that's hard to dislike. I think that's fantastic. I love that he plays through them, he sticks with them, and he gives us an accurate kind of thought.
His stuff is
review.
Detailed. Yeah,
it's very
detailed.
Yeah, so I love that about that guy.
It was Balan Wonderworld.
He's so positive.
Right?
I long to be that positive, but like I have a lot of hate in my heart. So
I think the one
That's
the demo that came out recently that he was finding positives on was Balan Wonderworld, which I gotta tell you, I played that demo on 2 different platforms and it was bad on both. So
not even performance wise, it's just not a good game.
That's the thing. It performed great, honestly. I thought it was doing what it meant to do.
I thought it was real bad on the Switch. Yeah. I tried it on the Switch, on the TV, and handheld, and it chugged for me.
Oh, did it perform?
Oh, okay. So I only did it on PC, and it played actually really, really good.
PC, it looked
good.
It looked pretty good. The style was fine, but running around was just not fun.
I don't know if it's just like that first world there that's just kind of like It's like, why are you throwing me in some like farm, like little
I don't know,
farm
man.
cartoon?
Nothing that's
Controls,
happening makes sense,
it's
and nothing you're doing
floaty. It doesn't
makes sense in the
control
story.
well.
Yeah.
It's not a game.
It just feels very PlayStation 1 while looking like a later PlayStation 3 game.
It's like a licensed game that someone put out.
Yeah. Like it feels like a place, right? It feels like a PlayStation 1, but it kind of looks like a late PS3 game. Like it just, I don't know.
Dude, yeah, it
Conversely,
reminds me of a
werewolf,
PS1 licensed game based on a Pixar movie. That's kind of what it gives me the vibes of.
Conversely, that werewolf game reminds me of a 360 game.
Oh, well, there you go.
Oh, there
Like
you go.
the way it looks and plays, I'm like, this would be really good in 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just bring it with you back in time,
Right.
and then be like,
Most
hey,
reviews say that it's like that PS2, like PS3, Xbox 360, Xbox era of like God of War style, like like action gaming or whatever.
I've seen some folks even.
It'd have been great if it came out then, But...
Someone compared it to the 3D Castlevania that was not.
Oh, that's a good comparison. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some cool mechanics in it and stuff. Like I'm transforming into a dog and then into a werewolf, and I'm just mauling people, and it's so bloody. There's some really cool ideas in it, but
yeah, I was reading up on some of the story about like the clan being or like they live around this like tree that they worship, and like there's all this deep lore because it's part of that existing Vampire the Masquerade universe.
Or like it's something?
No, it's part of the Vampire the Masquerade universe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's got a lot of deep lore. So like I know of what I've heard. I don't know for a fact. Like what I've heard is that the game has just like plenty of story and plenty of like setup and setting and stuff.
It probably just didn't have a good budget. Whoever I don't know who made it, but they probably
Cyanide Studios, I think.
Okay.
I don't know who that is, what they've done before.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about Swimming in Sevens because it sounds like that game and Balan Wonderworld, those would kind of be in that same bucket where they're not unplayable, but they're not going to strike for everybody. Someone might play Balan Wonderworld and be like, this is perfect. I love the art style or whatever. And that's fine if they love it. That's kind of what this category is for. Something that didn't click with everybody, but clicked with some of us. I just played a game that didn't really click with me gameplay-wise, but I liked the story, and that was The Medium. I know that's 2021. Just finished it. Really enjoyed the story. I thought it was well done. The visuals are great. But gameplay-wise, it was like not even as fun as like one of those old. If you would go back and play an old Silent Hill game now, you might think, well, it's gotten some nostalgia for me if you played it before, but it doesn't play super well. This plays similar to those, in my opinion. So
interesting.
Well, there's no combat. It's all
there's not really the combat. It's a little stealthy. It's a little puzzle solving.
Yeah, it's stealthy hide and seek type of.
It's just not my jam.
The puzzles are kind of, and I'm really enjoying the game, but the puzzles, to your defense, are kind of like get the thing that's here and take it back to the thing that was over there. So they're not really puzzles at all.
I kind of just wanted to watch I'll watch like a 4-hour cutscene. I'll split it up into 4 episodes and I'll just watch it. I just wanted to watch it. The gameplay, running around, you move really slow even when you're running.
It's a nice looking game.
It looks
nice.
Ray tracing looks good in that game. The lighting is amazing in that game. I think the monster is properly spooky. Like
the voice acting really creeped me out with the headphones in. It's like
it's Troy Baker. Yeah, he's properly spooky in that game, and like he's just like I want to wear your skin. And, like it's like
the modulation. He modulates his own voice at times. That's just terrifying. It's really good.
Yeah,
it's really good.
It's proper. Like, those parts are creepy. I had a couple like oh moments. But like in general, like I remember being like 3.5 hours in and going, I don't think I've killed anything yet. Like I've, which I hate to be that guy, but like I'm like, there's no combat in this game. What's going on? But I'm actually really enjoying it.
That dev doesn't really make those kind of games, or they haven't yet.
They're not that type of developer. But
the closest thing you get to killing folks is there's a couple sequences where you have to parry these attacks from these tentacles. That's the closest thing you get to killing something, and if you parry it correctly, they disintegrate. It's the closest thing you get. All right. So, but as far as games from last year that are in the Swimming in Sevens category, I'll give you a couple of mine. We'll jump over to the rest of you guys after that. There's a lot to choose from because I played a lot of games that I think other people would consider mediocre. That this past year had a lot that I really enjoyed. The number one for me, though, based on the scores, is going to have to be Haven, which is actually on my favorites of the year, but it got a 78. I think was the highest score I saw for it on Metacritic. So technically, it's a 7 out of 10 game for a lot of folks, or lower in some cases. But for me, I thought it was just phenomenal. And I'll talk about it more when we talk about our favorite story and overall. I don't think it's going to make our shared ranked lists. But for me personally, I just think it's great. Everything from the visuals. We were chatting earlier this week about the The score, the music is amazing in that game. Even when you fire up the game for the first time, that opening cinematic with the music is just so well done. It's just really, really well done. So for me, it's Haven and then Maneater. They're both right at the top.
Maneater is 7 out of 10 AF.
It really is.
Sure
for me, Haven feels like an 8.5 for me.
Dude,
personally.
yeah, it should be way higher. Honestly,
I think Haven to me is a better game.
Games, yeah.
Maneater, I can confidently give Maneater like a 7.5 out of 10, something like that personally, and still be like, no, yeah, but I love it. I love it to death.
Right.
It's everything that I needed a B movie to be, or a B video game in this case to be. It's cheesy, it's over the top violent. The controls and camera can often be wonky and frustrating. I had some glitches. I think they've patched a lot of this stuff since then, but I lost a save at one point and lost a bunch of progression. Things like that are like yeah, they're just frustrating.
And it is an RPG, so that's really frustrating. It's like a shark RPG, so that's really frustrating.
Open world shark RPG. But by the end, when you're out there going toe to toe with sperm whales and orcas without an issue, no problem. And like anything before that was giving you like great white sharks are now like one bite and they're dead. So when you get to that size and that power, it's just fun. For the same folks who loved the Rampage arcade games, to me it gives me that same vibe where it's just I'm super powerful and no one can really stop me. So love Maneater. I think it's a blast. If you see it on sale, I recommend it. What about you, Dan? Since this is your segment, I want to go to you. What do you think for your swimming in sevens? What would you pick?
I did put Maneater on there. I haven't gotten super far in it. I think I've played a couple of hours, but I was showing my brother-in-law. I was just showing him the game a bit. He was like, "Yeah, jump up on the pier there," because there was like this like pier, and try to like nom on some people, and I definitely did. I just like kind of hopped up there. I mean, you lose oxygen as you are above water, but it was worth it because I definitely like nabbed somebody and just dragged them under the water, and they're just screaming, blood everywhere. It's hilarious. That's definitely.
And you can upgrade that stuff to the point where you can out on the land for so long it's just ridiculous. Like I'm out on the golf course just chomping all the golfers and they're just screaming and they can't do anything about it. I'm just hanging out on the land. Like
don't you have some pretty unrealistic like powers by the end of the game? Yeah.
You unlock some really sick kind of skins or armor that give you special abilities, whether it's stealth or like bone armor and all kinds of stuff. It's just really cool looking. Yeah.
This one I only actually played for a couple of weeks and then something came out and I was distracted, but I actually thought it was super fun. Spellbreak.
Yeah.
The average score of that I think was in the middle 70s when I looked on Metacritic, but I actually thought it was super fun. So it's a battle royale, but you're basically a bunch of wizards and you are running around. It was a team of 3, I think, and you're just like hurling different spells depending on what you actually have equipped. I thought it was unique. It wasn't just like, oh, look, guns, another battle royale with gun. Like there's so many of those already. So I just kind of appreciated that this one was a little different. So and it's still going. I think they've added some stuff to it. I haven't tried it since like, again, literally the first like couple of weeks that it was released. So
yeah, my kids all got it because it was free, of course. So they're all playing it across their Switches and they enjoyed it.
Yeah. Are they still playing it or?
No, they're all back on Minecraft. Okay. Stupid Minecraft.
Okay. Stupid blocks. Dumb blocks that look all 16-bit.
They could play Minecraft for days. No problem.
Yeah, I know. And then this one, I could slip in technically because I guess the average score was 79, even though to me it's like a 9. Resident Evil 3 remake. High 70s. But I think that game is excellent for me personally. So
I don't know why people soured on this game so much.
Well, because I mean, they definitely skimmed out on some stuff. Like they definitely cut some stuff. Like when you compare it against the original, like
Mercenaries mode, right? Like they cut that out.
Well, there's that. I mean, people anticipated it was going to have the Mercenaries mode, and it didn't. But I mean, the actual game, like when you go back and play the original, there's more sections that are in the streets of Raccoon City. Mm-hmm. And this game, there's just not as much.
It actually cuts out some of the campaign, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah. And people kind of were like, well, is it going to be DLC? And like, there's been literally no DLC for the game. So
how much of that score is based on expectations of the old game and how much of it is just an objective take on this as a game? You know what I mean?
Well, that and comparing it to Resident Evil 2 remake, right. which was like what,
a 92 or 91, I think.
Yeah. So
I think see how. Oh, God.
No, I was just saying. I think with that having come out, and then it was literally the next year we got RE3 remake. So I think people had expectations.
Well, and I think people like there's a little more meat on the bones in RE2 in terms of like more puzzles and stuff like that. And I think maybe people, but like 3 was kind of always a little more action oriented. In fact, they all kind of get more action oriented as they go on through 1 through 6. So I don't know. There's a like expectations versus reality conversation here.
I think 3 was shorter. 3 was automatically shorter too because you didn't have 2 separate campaigns. Resident Evil 2 in the original, you had the 2 different discs for Leon and Claire. So there's that also, which they did do in these remakes. So
RE3 is totally a 9. I agree with that. That's great.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's super fun. So yeah, but those are the ones that I had. So
Kyle, what about you? Any games that are considered mediocre this past year that you really enjoyed?
I was actually gonna go with something, but my heart went, elsewhere, and I looked at Metacritic here to see like if it was a true 70, and it is. It's in the 70s, and it's Star Wars Squadrons. I was just playing that the other night.
Yep.
And if you really want a really convincing, authentic Star Wars experience, it's awesome. People complain about like being stuck in the first person perspective, like in the cockpit, but it's so cool because everything that you see there, like if you look at any encyclopedia or diagram or even in movies, like that's what it looks like. It's 1-to-1. EA does a really good job of like photoshopping or photo taking like stuff from the actual Disney and Star Wars and Lucasfilm vault. So everything's very, very, very accurate, and it's just super cool. The sounds are accurate, Online's very fun. I will say, if you jump in now, it's the same people who've been playing since October, so they're going to kill you. So it's hard to jump into, but the story mode's really good. I think the story was excellent, I think it was a cool time for it to take place, we've seen, like, the Empire, guy, like, is going to defect to Rebel story before. That's in the prologue. It's not spoilers, sorry. But like, but it's done well, and it gives you a good platform to kind of like jump off and to use different like ships. And I think I don't know. I like the campaign a lot. I think it's a great
voice acting is great.
I was going to say awesome. It is only first person.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do prefer third person, but I mean, obviously, with something like that, like you do want it to be authentic if it is going to just be in first person. So
yeah, and I think can
you change your camera to go outside of the cockpit? I think you can.
I don't think you can.
No, okay.
I could be wrong. I don't think you can though. I could be wrong though.
I can't remember.
Corrections.
Yeah, exactly. we'll next week we'll.
We're not going to think about this. Yeah, you're right, man. There's especially some missions where, like, one of my favorite missions was where you're essentially doing a trench run around this big circular starship or space station of some kind, and you have to do these runs really close down, otherwise you're going to get shot out of the sky, and you have to drop bombs with the right timing, and it really feels very Star Wars. And I mean, the visuals, I got it on PC, the visuals are great. I would have loved to try it in VR, but I don't have a fancy VR headset for my PC just yet. But yeah, it's a great game. It's a great game, especially if you consider how it's 7 out of 10, and it was $40 full price, so you can find it way cheaper than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rogue Squadron feels for days with this game.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not one that I'll fight for when it comes to ranking the overall games, but it's a good one to call out for.
I don't even think it's on my top 10, but like, it's a wonderful 7.
It just barely didn't make mine. I just didn't expect it to. I didn't expect it to be so involved. Like,
it's very
gameplay.
Switching like your shields to your laser blasters and back to your shields and to your boosters.
You actually have to strategize
way
what
more
you're
going
doing
on in this game than people.
You know what I expected? I expected a Battlefront, but actual space fighting. So I expected it to be very shallow and repetitive, and probably look good. But I didn't realize it was going to be, this is a really good story with characters that I kind of care about and want to see what happens. I didn't expect
returning characters, like, you have characters from Rebels in it, and there's a lot of familiar faces, Wedges in it, like it's fun seeing like familiar faces and going, like, so,
it was good.
It's a good pick for me.
Yeah. Any others for you, Kyle, or we can jump to Jeff?
No, jump to someone else. No, that was it for me.
I actually agree with both of Tim's takes on Haven and whatever the other one was that you mentioned, Maneater. I agree with exactly where you put them, because Haven's underrated and Maneater is like actually a good 7 out of 10.
That's where it should go.
Yeah, exactly.
It belongs there.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have an underrated one. I feel like both of mine my examples are 7 out of 10s, and I respect people that have issues with them. Well. Okay, maybe one of them I do consider underrated, but Avengers is definitely a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, 10 out of 10 story though.
Yeah, story's awesome. We might talk about that. I don't know. I'll try to bring it up. We'll see. Depends on how long we're going to make that list, because I can't. We'll get to stories, but anyway, Avengers though, I even went back to it to play the Kate Bishop DLC, and yes, I understand why it was 6 and 7s when it launched, because there were so many issues, and Kyle had more than I did, but we did have our share together. I had my own issues with, on a technical level, the game, but I had so much fun with even though it gets repetitive and a little ridiculous sometimes. Now the combat feels great. Now it feels like the fun game it meant to be. Even though there's still repetition in the combat and stuff, it's still so much fun to play. And Kate Bishop might be like one of my favorite ones to play as, because she can teleport, she has a sword, and her ranged combat with obviously because she's a Hawkeye, is just awesome.
It seemed to me like there was too much inconsistency across characters. Some of them are really fun to use, and I kind of got into a rhythm. And then you'd switch over to someone else, either by choice or by force, depending on the story scenario. And sometimes I liked it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool new thing. They teach you along the way. And some of it was just not fun. Some of the characters were not fun to use, which was a bummer to me.
The only person I had an issue playing as was Hulk.
He's kind of slow, right?
He's a little sluggish, and his combat options are just very limited.
Dude, they need to make another game like that old PS2 Ultimate Destruction, whatever that game was called.
Yes.
Yeah.
The open
that game
world,
was
Hulk game,
like a perfect Hulk game.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I remember that.
Slamming like helicopters.
Actually, you could grab a car, break it in half, and you got boxing gloves. I mean,
Actually, you know what? I guess I would put Ms. Marvel under least favorite ones to play too, even though it's her story, and I love.
Dude, I was gonna say that I won't offend anybody, because I know she's such an endearing character. We'll talk about that with story. I loved her character, and I'm really excited for that. They're making that a show. I think it's gonna be really endearing and fun. But fighting with her in the game, like as a video game character control, I always controlled someone else if there was anyone else in the story.
Something sluggish about her character, her and Hulk. And you're playing them, it feels like most of the main story, but once it was cool. Like, I didn't expect Captain America to be so fun to play, where I'm like, cool, I'm gonna play as that guy again. He's just ridiculously fast. Iron Man feels as great as you would imagine he would. Thor is the same.
Telling you, man, if that game is annoying you and you want to just cheese through the combat, just get Iron Man. I'm telling you, you can cheese that entire game with floating around, shooting rockets at everybody.
I did finish the Kate Bishop DLC, ends on a cliffhanger too, and I'm like, oh, this poor dev. They're never gonna release 30 characters that they want to release.
I feel like it's too late to recoup fandom and stuff, but I applaud them for trying. They put a lot of money into this property.
I hope they turn a corner, because the Hawkeye, they're still going to release the Hawkeye one. They're so far into development on it that
that's like Old Man Logan DLC, right? That's where Hulk is the leader of he takes over everything, but it's happening in a different dimension or something.
Well, it's long gray-haired Hulk, right? I don't know. If it's the same Hulk or a different Hulk. But
the Kate Bishop DLC introduces the idea of at the time they call it quote unquote time travel, because she's looking for Hawkeye and he's going through this portal for time traveling purposes. But I think it's just alternate dimension stuff, and they dive more into that the Clint Barton Hawkeye.
I really truly feel like
the Kate Bishop one is really good. I highly recommend that one.
They should have given it an extra 6+ months, to be honest, and then maybe kind of I don't know. I also didn't, and Tim didn't like it either, just the way that the game is actually structured. Hey, let me go back to the ship, and then I go to the little command desk thing, and then I click on a thing, and then it takes a literally over a minute to load something, and then
it's very Destiny in that regard.
Yeah.
Well,
it's you're watching a lot of loading.
It interrupts what otherwise is a very strong, maybe not the best, but a very strong story. And that is so interruptive, and I'll talk about that when we get to the story mode. That was a problem for me.
I think it needed next gen. It needed that solid state drive so it can load things faster. If it was gonna
or just not have that format. I think they chose the wrong format to begin with.
Yeah, make that format the end game. You finish the story, now you shift into more of a mission.
Yeah. But you just play the story when it's the story, I don't know why it wasn't like that. That's very bizarre to me as well.
Yeah.
But
well, Jeff, do you have any other ones before we move on to the next category?
Yeah, this one I do feel there were atrocious reviews for this game, and I don't get it. So I guess you can consider it underrated, but I wouldn't rate it much higher than a 7. Battletoads. There are certain reviews that are like, this is the worst piece of garbage, that have a hate boner for this game, and I don't get it. I just don't.
It's so much fun to me. Was it Destructoid who was just I forget who it was, but like they
IGN called it bad. I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't
Really?
understand why it's not
bad.
as hard as it used to be, and yada yada, and like it just made me want to play the old games. I'm like, man, this is really weird because a lot of the other reviews were at least like okay, like people were
It's not
okay
a
with
bad
it.
game. It's just not the best game.
It's a pretty fun, beat 'em up, I guess, and I like the art style. It looks cool.
Yeah, the art style is super rad, and it felt like I was
Some
playing
people
Saturday.
can't let go of the past.
I want it to be hard.
That's what she said.
There it is. There it is.
She did.
There
She
we
definitely said that. At
I was
least
like, that was a slow pitch softball one right there. I was waiting for
I
someone.
know. It's low hanging fruit, guys.
that's all I got. It's just
all right, cool. Well, all right, thanks. I like that. I liked highlighting games that aren't really going to be, top of the top when it comes to some of these other lists. So it's good to highlight those because it's not like you can't have fun with a game that someone else doesn't love. I've had fun with plenty of games that others are like, this is mediocre. I'm like, but I can't stop playing it. Like Sea of Thieves. I'm still playing that stupid game.
I love that game.
3 years later or whatever.
But they've spruced it up though, at least.
There's a ton to do, but it's still the similar format where you go and you play for what is essentially a run. You're not really progressing skills or stats or anything. And when you log out and log back in, you have to restock your boat. Like only thing that sticks around is your money and the things you've purchased to like visually upgrade stuff. But
it is just cosmetics, right? Like there's nothing.
It's just cosmetics, yeah.
And like if you get a new sword, it's not stronger. It just looks different, Like,
and then you can upgrade lots of stuff. Like you're standing with others, the ability to buy stuff from them. You can represent them with, which by the way, if you choose to be an emissary for any of the factions or whatever, didn't realize that means you show up on the map and now you're a target for other players.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I got killed. Anyway,
yeah.
Were you soloing it? Was it just you?
I was rolling solo. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, I just sometimes like to throw on a podcast and just play Sea of Thieves for a couple hours.
I play by myself all the time, but you will get bullied. Like you will.
You do get bullied. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's cover one more category before, and hopefully Derek will be able to join us to talk best story. But let's talk if you guys have any favorite strategy or simulation games from this past year. Basically, stuff that again typically struggles to rise up to, overall game of the year categories and things like that. But it's still fun to call them out as good games in their respective categories. So we're calling it best strategy game. You can throw in best sim game there as well if you have any. Do you guys have any that come to mind from this past year? Really, any kind of strategy. It doesn't have to be, RTS necessarily or whatever.
Well, I had one in mind, which is why I asked you if you could throw sim in there.
Yeah.
Technically, it's I think a 2-year-old game, but it came out on consoles this year.
Okay.
Can you guess what it is, Tim? It involves roller coasters.
Planet Coaster.
Yes. Planet Coaster. I'm still chipping away at my Christmas theme park. It's coming along real nice. So
nice.
It's super fun, and it's just very meticulous.
I love games where you get to build a park. Like I played this year for the first time Jurassic Park Evolution and had a blast with it. And I kept it installed because every once in a while I'll jump back in and mess around with my Dino Park. It's a fun game.
That's actually what I had as my second choice, even though that's like a 2 or 3-year-old game.
I think that's coming to Game Pass soon. So if you have a Game
Pass,
okay. Nice. Yeah. Now Planet Coaster, if you were into the roller coaster tycoon series at all, it's super cool. And it's not just about building like the park, like it's an actual simulation. So, people do come to the park and they go on the rides and, you accumulate money and you have to hire people and they can be unhappy. You can make roller coasters super insane and then people actually will get sick. So like you try to like build a balanced roller coaster so that doesn't really happen. And
what if you want to make people sick? Do you lose money?
I don't know. Because I'm still building the park, so I don't have guests in the park yet. But I'm in sandbox mode, and I love when games like this do this. So you choose sandbox mode, and you just have unlimited funds, because you're basically just more doing it for the building of the park. And then kind of just letting things like just unfold once you're done with it. I'm not playing it to kind of be like, oh, let me start from the bottom and kind of like steadily, I just want to build the park and then let people come in and just see what happens. So, but it's super fun. So
nice.
Super fun. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a sim game that I've already talked about a little bit that it's similar in that you're just kind of building and trying to make money and grow the business. And that's 2 Point Hospital. I talked about it a little bit, but really fun, goofy building game. You start really small. You have this little hospital you have to clean up and and fix up. You like decide where the walls go and where the restrooms are. Is there enough seating for everybody? You have to hire staff. It's a little bit like Zoo Tycoon, but with a hospital. If you ever played Zoo Tycoon back in the day. But it's a lot of fun. It's also very silly. They keep it very lighthearted. All the illnesses are very fake and goofy. Like there's one where you come down with the illness. I forget what it's called. It's a silly name, and the idea is that you think you're a clown, and so you have to build some special machine that they walk into. It spins them around, kind of like Sims style a little bit. Spins them around, they come back out, and they're not a clown anymore. That kind of thing. So it's very silly and cartoony, and I think that's good. I don't want a hospital sim game where people are coming in with like stage 4 cancer or something like.
No, so there's no AIDS in the game, is what you're saying?
No AIDS. Yeah. I'm sure there's some mods on the PC version.
It looks like it came out on the PC in 2018, but finally consoles got it this 2020.
Correct.
That one
it's on Game Pass.
As you're describing it, I kind of want to play it now because of
it
how
looks
silly
cool.
it sounds.
The more you talk about it, because
it's on Game Pass. It's worth downloading and trying if you have Game Pass.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's also on Switch. I bought it on Switch because my son and I played it for a while, the month or two that it came out on Switch. And it's just a fun one to have on the couch while you have a movie or a show on or something, just to sit there building your hospital on the Switch.
They have a jumbo release coming with all DLC next month.
And the DLC, of course, just adds more illnesses and more devices, bigger hospitals to build, more. It's a simulation builder.
Mm-hmm. Although you said not real illnesses, and I'm pretty sure there are actual clown people in the world, Tim. That's just the people on the internet.
They might have some mild stuff like colds, but I know they stay away from serious real stuff.
It's the people that called WandaVision slow.
Yes.
They missed the opportunity to do. They should have done some kind of tongue-in-cheek COVID reference, but maybe they wanted to stay away from that. But all right.
I get it. I would get it.
Yeah. It'd be funny. All right. The other one that is by far my favorite, I think, is the best strategy game of the year, and it's not even close, is Crusader Kings 3. The game is amazing. And for a game that doesn't have a whole lot of actual on-screen action, it's very much like you're looking at a map and you're looking at borders and trying to figure out which regions you can try to make a claim on. And I can't make a claim here yet, but if I marry off my nephew to the person over here, now I've got it's not a very well-supported claim, but I've got a claim and I can declare war based on that claim. So you've got all these different webs that you can start concocting. And the other thing is, I always think of most strategy games as I'm the leader. It's me. King Timothy or whatever, and I'm in charge. But this game is very different. You control a named character, and when you start, they're at whatever age they're at. You can decide, you pick whatever character you want. They're eventually going to die, and their heir, whoever's alive and is their heir, will take over. And maybe you decide you don't want that kid, whoever it is, or the lady, whoever it is, to take over. Over time, you can also build the influence you need to change the laws, and now the right of succession is totally different. Maybe it's not firstborn, maybe it's now a voting system, or maybe it's male or female, or maybe you can require them to be of a certain religion and they converted so they can't be the king, so now it's got to go to there's so much intricacy in this thing. It's fascinating and it's a blast. If you've got Game Pass for the PC, you can get it there for free and play it.
Nice.
It is by far one of the most ambitious, and I think they deliver on it, strategy games I've ever played. And I barely scratched the surface. I think I put like 60 hours into this game. And it's not a game that has like a start and a finish. You just go as long as you can. Like, you don't really end. You keep going. It goes to the next generation. That person dies. You go and you just keep on going. If there is a finish to it, I don't know where that would be. So
that's cool.
So it's not like Age of Empires or Rise of Nations where technology advances. It's not like that. It's meant to stay kind of in the general timeline that you're in. So.
I do love those though. I miss Age of Empires. They're making a new one or remastering one, right? I think
they've remastered some recently. I don't know if they're doing it, but
I love those.
Crusader Kings 3 it's a brilliant strategy game, and it is strategy in every sense of the word. There's some battle elements where you tell your armies to go attack here, but that's not very RTS. So I don't want to sell it and to be something that it's not. So. Kyle or Jeff, anything that you guys played sim or strategy you want to highlight?
Not really in those categories, weirdly.
I forgot Gears Tactics. Sorry, Xbox.
No.
My bad. Gears Tactics is
everyone was like, oh,
Gears.
Yeah. No, Gears Tactics is one of the finest strategy games this year as well, but
I wanted to get to that one, and that's downloaded on my Xbox, and I plan to get
You'll
to
like
it.
it.
I like XCOM, and Gears can,
You'll enjoy it.
I'll enjoy it.
It requires strategy. It's a really good turn-based strategy game. So it's very good. But yeah. Jeff, what about you? Anything?
Oh, I only played Command and Conquer Remastered.
Oh yeah, how was that?
Man, what a throwback! It really, really.
I was gonna say that's old school.
Man,
dude,
playing
right
that
away
while
it
watching
throws it
WWF, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eating Hot Pockets,
Eating Hot Pockets and Doritos.
Listening to Linkin Park or something.
Oh boy, yeah.
I didn't listen to garbage, so
Okay, all right.
I'm kidding. Linkin
Okay.
Park's
Tim,
not
hit that
garbage.
delete button,
I'm
please.
sorry.
Chester saying like an
That's a little
angel. How
early for
dare
Linkin
you?
Yeah, how dare you?
Command and Conquer was probably more like Pearl Jam days. But, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Here and flow.
Yeah, sure.
There it is. All you have to do for a Pearl Jam impersonation is just basically hold back a cough.
Yeah.
Make that sound.
Pearl.
Yes, sir. So I mean, it was an immediate throwback when you start the game. It starts with like this recruitment video that's super cheesy and 90s looking, and then you have the option of toggling the original graphics or playing it in the remastered.
Cool.
And in the remastered, you're like, whoa, that's a pretty stark difference in a 4K monitor. But yeah, I mean, obviously gameplay wise, nothing changed. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Command and Conquer, the original. Yeah, that was fun to play. But ultimately, that was the only one type of that game that I would play because I played that back in the day. I just I just don't enjoy playing that genre. Ultimately, I guess
that's fair. Yeah.
But I guess simulator wise, I mean, the only game that I played that even has simulator in the title is Flight Simulator.
Yeah,
well, there you go.
But that's it. I mean, that's
counts.
not really the same as like a 2 Point Hospital where you're creating stuff. It's just you're just simulating a flight.
The sim.
Still sim.
I would be a horrible pilot. I just crashed a lot. I am awful at that game.
We had to do a couple key things. When I just wanted to play it and just see the view, I went to a couple exotic locations just to take off and kind of see, cool beaches or mountains or something like that, or Alaska. And then I took off to the airport closest to our house so we could find our house. And it really does have accurate streets and stuff. Oh, it's just once you kind of crash and or land, but yeah, let's say crash your plane. I mean, everything's just kind of a flat. You see, that's just a flat image from above. It's not. They're not rendering like everything 3D down to the ground.
It is.
So, and it's what it's supposed to be. It's not. Yeah. But anyway, still. Oh, and we also decided we had to, of course, take off with the biggest airliner we could possibly use, and just fly it out into the ocean and then nose bomb just to see what happened. And I can report that what happens is you bounce off the ocean. It's silly.
I've only successfully
like real life. Okay.
Yeah,
just like real life.
What a sim.
Just like in Lost. You guys remember that?
They bounced off the ocean, and then the show never happened.
That was it.
That happened in Air Force One with Harrison Ford guys. They bounced off the ocean.
Except that was more of a skip. I'm talking like nose straight down, and then you bounce.
They did kind of control like crashing in the ocean. That's true.
Yeah, what a technical marvel that game is. It's pretty astounding what they've done. I'm just not good at I just don't have patience. I think that's all it is. I'm the
technical
type of
marvel
that's
outside
like,
of the
I want
crashes.
my results right now, and that's I'm just
this is America. I want it
crash
now.
A lot?
Yeah,
Is
I'm too bad at it.
Yeah, the crashing was not great. Now, if they should have gotten the Burnout Paradise people to do the crashing part, if they would have combined their efforts, it could have been beautiful.
Slow-mo and third person,
crashing,
and you're seeing everything explode in detail.
Just different gears and parts flying in every direction.
Jeff, when you mentioned Command and Conquer, it reminded me, I did play a little bit of another RTS that I got during a not CD keys, but it's that GOG, that Game Over Galaxy or whatever it's called.
That's where I played Cyberpunk. Yeah.
They have a lot of good sales regularly. And anyway, they had a Star Wars sale, and I got Star Wars Battlegrounds, which was an old early 2000s RTS. Kind of built on the Age of Empires engine, basically, with a Star Wars skin over it. And dude, that game is a blast. Like, it's very simple. It doesn't live up to today's RTS standards, but I think it was like $2 on this sale. So I got it.
I'm telling you, dude, that Age of Empires formula is just
it works.
That's exactly that type of game that I love. It's just so much fun building the empire, but then you could also have a little like, army of dudes just like kind of marching to wherever, and they just start hacking at buildings and it sets on fire. Like,
yep, I grabbed that, and it comes with all the DLC, which is pretty much the prequels. It aligns with the prequels. That way you have like the Naboo army or the Trade Federation or the Republic, whatever else.
I love it.
And then Then I got Star Wars Empires, which goes back to more of the original trilogy, where you've got the Rebellion and the Empire and stuff like that.
Galactic
But,
Civil War.
Yep. So it was really fun. But you reminded me of that when you said Command and Conquer.
No.
All right. Well, we're gonna jump into our first list that we need to rank together. I've been texting with Derek a little bit, and we're gonna cut him some slack because he's spending some time with much needed time with his kids. So not gonna hold it against him.
Boo, kids.
Not gonna hold it against him. But
Quit
so
having
we'll get into
kids.
best story, and then we'll see where we're at. We'll see if we want to just keep rolling on into our final category, or if we decide to wait till Derek's here. But we all kind of know what Derek would say.
Hey, we'll
right?
actually be able to say what is meaningful and has good stories and stuff, and not be, a little, peanut gallery off to the side.
Guys, Derek's not here. Let's just let the tears flow. Okay, let's just.
Sure.
It's about time.
Now I get
Tim.
to openly discuss which games made me cry and not feel bad about it.
It's about
and not get bullied.
I don't have to get triggered and feel upset that I can't talk about being upset.
Yeah.
And cry.
I'm happy that you're happy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to share my screen, and we will get on here with best story of 2020. Can you guys
Microsoft
see
Flight Simulator, best story.
best
Okay.
story?
All right.
Can
Moving
you guys
on.
see my screen?
Yes. Now my screen is very bright.
There you go. All right,
Same.
so I'm zoomed in a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot of games to choose from here. I tried to trim down from the overall games list, trim out stuff that doesn't, to me, obviously has no story. And then I left everything else, even if I was unsure, just in case it had a good story. So I figure we'll just go through this list, kind of like we've done before. We'll look at this first section of games, and we'll take turns mentioning games we want to move over to at least discuss a little bit. And then I'll scroll down to the next section, and we'll go from there. So, Jeff, why don't we start with you? What jumps out at you? Even if you can't see it here, you just might already know. We need to move this.
I'm going to go with a little indie game that nobody's played. I'm going to go with Last of Us Part 2.
There you go.
What's that? Who makes
Nobody's
that?
talking about this game. It's insane to me. It's
Who
not.
makes
It's
that?
definitely not.
That
Link.
was Devolver Digital, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Kyle, what about you?
I think I gotta go Ghost of Tsushima for sure.
Okay.
Sush.
Dan?
Actually, Tim, I noticed Assassin's Creed Valhalla is on there, and I'm confused as to why.
Because it's got an amazing story. You shut your mouth.
Does it? 7 remake, obviously.
Listen, I'm going to move Assassin's Creed over, but I can't pretend like it doesn't have horrible pacing or major issues with telling its story, but when you get to the meat of it, it's pretty good.
You know how I feel about the stories being incomplete and then passing it on to DLC. You know how I feel about that.
I know. That's why it's not going to win. It might not even get ranked, but I am going to move it over as my pick.
That's fair. That's fair.
Talking about Jeff.
Oh, we're back to me. Miles Morales.
Yeah, Spider-Man. Okay.
Yes.
You guys have talked this one up a lot, so I imagine this one's going to be a strong contender. Kyle?
Yeah.
Cyberpunk.
Okay.
Whoa. That's breathtaking.
Come on, samurai.
Dan?
The breathtaking choice. Can you scroll down, please?
Brave. Stunning.
Trying to think. What else did I've played that actually? Well, you know what? Let's throw Avengers on there for Jeff. Throw it on there for Jeff.
Yeah, because I'm running low on story choices because I didn't beat a lot of games that have stories. Primarily because the stories just didn't. If the story hooks me, man, I can't put it down.
Yeah.
Did anybody else play Tell Me Why? I didn't play it, but
I would put that.
Be a good story.
I would put that in the story. Yeah.
Really
it's story driven. That's the only thing it has.
That's
really.
Literally what it is.
Story.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move Yakuza Like a Dragon.
That was gonna be mine. Yeah.
Good.
Thank
Same.
you.
I would move Watch Dogs. I'm gonna move it, and we'll talk about it. The thing with Watch Dogs Legion is that. Oh, you know what? We'll get to it. I'm gonna move it over. So
I'll try and be nice when we talk about that game.
Yeah, I'll talk about it, but I'll also talk about why it's not gonna make the final list. But I still want to move it over to be considered. Feel free to jump in, by the way, just anybody as you see anything on here. I'm gonna move the pathless over.
I was gonna ask, is it too passive for this list, or
no, man?
Okay,
I think it's a strong, pretty much wordless story.
Yeah.
Well, not
You're
wordless.
just gonna
It's
have
got
to
some
figure
words,
it
but
out. Yeah, it does. A lot of it's
got words. Got the best words.
It's very Shadow of the Colossus. We'll talk about it. Last Campfire, does that have a good story?
I don't know.
Not really. I mean,
okay.
I would say 13.
Similar. Honestly, it's kind of similar to what's the one where you're kind of like Spiritfarer a little bit, where people die and you have to help them like kind of cross over in a sense, I guess.
I was going to suggest we talk about Spiritfarer for this too, although
it's a more like great setting and great like
it's more of a
like,
setting.
Yeah, I don't know how great the story is in that game.
I've
more
heard
of what you're
that,
doing.
I've heard
is
that the final, like the way it resolves, is quite sweet. Which
it has
is not
an ending?
surprised.
I thought it was a forever game.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think I think it does have an ending.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Credits roll.
Interesting.
Let's bring Star Wars Squadrons over to talk about the story.
Good
there.
story.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
Star Wars, and
yeah.
it's a good story. They brought the story for that. They didn't need to at all. It could have just been a flying multiplayer game, and yeah.
You know, Sakuna, I assume, would have a decent story where you're kind of doing some farming and some fighting. I just haven't played it, so I don't know anything about that one. Sakuna of Rice and Ruin.
Let's throw Resident Evil 3.
Yeah, I've been
and Ori and Will of the Wisps.
That's just been going in my head this entire time.
Ori was Resident Evil 3. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay, I didn't play Paper Mario.
I mean, the Mario stories are not really why I play.
They're usually
games,
funny.
honestly.
Like I bet this game would make me laugh, but
yeah, there's some humor.
Like Bowser's story was really funny on DS, and yeah, there's some good writing sometimes.
Dude, some of the Game Boy Advance ones, the Mario and Luigi games, really had legit.
Mario and Luigi has great stories, yeah, or great
really funny
moments, great lines, yeah.
Neo 2, from what I remember, there's a storyline to it, but boy, I don't remember it being very strong. I could be misremembering. If Derek were here, he'd let me know. But same with Mortal Shell. It just kind of throws you into the game.
Yeah.
Neo 2 does continue the story from Neo 1, and I never finished Neo 1.
It's a prequel, though, right?
Well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I guess you might be right.
Yeah, I think it's.
But I know that folks who didn't play the first one, it's easy to get lost because I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was fighting things. So,
I think Hades has a clever story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Hades. Let's move that one over. I wish we had played Half-Life Alyx because I feel like that's got a good story.
Yeah,
I want to play Half-Life Alyx so bad. Yeah,
you need quite the rig
I'm
for
bringing
that.
Haven over. I love the story in Haven. I'm almost done with that game, and I love it.
I endorse that.
Yeah. Immortal
really
story is
cool
decent.
story.
We'll talk about Immortals. It's not amazing, but decent.
It's pretty clever way to do what they're doing.
Dan, did you play some Melody of Memory for Kingdom Hearts? Because I've heard that's got story elements to it.
I have not, though. No.
Okay.
But I mean, from what I've heard, it's like minimal. There is some stuff in there, but it's not, it's more of like a musical recap of like the whole series with some extra stuff. But
yeah, I'm not gonna bring Maneater over because the story of that is basically mean guy kills your mom and puts a cut on your face and then hunts you for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
That's it.
he's
Very
but
simple.
Chris Parnell's there, so
Dude, Chris Parnell's narration alone might deserve the best story. His narration is so funny.
Yeah, it is.
It's not just like his delivery.
Godfall. Is that story good, guys? Or...
I don't know. Let's ask Derek.
The Hyrule Warriors story is pretty cool, but I didn't get far enough in it to really make a.
It's kind of cool,
case
but
for it.
I feel like the whole we're rewriting. I don't know. There's something about that story that really rubbed me the wrong way.
It's got a great opening sequence that's kind of like, oh, this is interesting, and then
yeah. I like seeing everything kind of plan out, but it seems like they're like, well, and sometime in Breath of the Wild, some machine came back in time and is warning everybody what's happening, and I'm like, I don't know how much I feel about this. I thought
when did that happen? Yeah.
Exactly. Like I didn't see that ever happen, so I don't know. It's alright. It's
Gears Tactics has a story. I didn't know.
Yeah,
that.
man.
I heard the story is actually pretty good.
Gears Tactics is a really solid Gears war story. Yep. Genshin Impact. I didn't play it enough to really know.
I mean, there is a story.
I know the beginnings where you pick a twin and then something happens to the other one, and then you're
like there's
like
cutscenes and they're voice acted and everything, but like to be honest, it's not like I wasn't like at the edge of my seat, like I want to know what's gonna happen, Like
I think they're more building a world than they are worried about building a dramatic story.
Yeah.
I wanted to play Empire of Sin, but I never got into it. I'm sure I will at some point, but I imagine that's got a fun little mafia story in it, but I never played it.
I really want to play that too. Yeah.
Doom Eternal story, didn't see it through to the end, so I don't know what to tell you. Sorry, everybody, for...
Yeah, I don't know, man. There's something about that game that just sucks, so... Sorry.
It's so funny because It's so funny because collectively, I feel like amongst us, like that seems to be the gist. But like the Easy Allies, like love the second.
I know, yeah, and I like usually respect their opinions, just not this time, you know.
Just not this time.
They're stupid and they're horrible.
I'm not moving Crusader Kings 3 over because that one really doesn't have. It has settings, and then you go do whatever you want. There's not really a. Maybe someone would argue with me, like, yeah, they craft tons of stories depending on what you choose. Kinda, not really. It's more like a scenario, and you respond, and so I wouldn't fight for it as much as I love that game. I don't even think it has a good story necessarily.
For Gaston's sake, do we want to consider Crash Bandicoot, or is that not a?
We can bring it over. I actually think it's funny. We can at least talk about it, but then it's probably not going to make top 10. Call of Duty's story, is that anything worth?
I think their single player campaign has a really cool. I mean, there's a really cool premise going on there. It's
I think a lot of people just like it because
kind of rooted in reality.
Black Ops is known to have like the good stories though, so except for the one that didn't have a campaign at all, but all the other ones.
Yeah. Oh, and we gotta move over 13 Sentinels just because for no other reason I've played it a little bit.
Yeah,
it's a great story.
The story's really good.
Yeah, I haven't beaten that game, but it's
That's definitely the main pull, the main attraction with that game.
It certainly is because the gameplay was
awful,
not fun.
It's not pleasant to look at.
Every time it makes me go to a fight scene, like, oh crap.
Yeah. Can't we talk more?
Like I almost just want it to be a walking simulator adventure game at this point. I'm just like, let me talk to people and figure out the mysteries.
I kind of wish they made it more like a like Armored Core. Do you remember that series?
Yeah.
Kind of wish they made it like that.
It could be cool.
Yeah.
From Software did Armored Core.
Or even like, did you guys play the PS2 Xeno Saga games when you're out in space?
Right.
And
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That was a good RPG
series. Those games all sound terrible. How dare you?
Jeff, they're amazing. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Xeno Saga had the notoriously longest cutscenes ever.
Oh yeah.
And and there was that game was like 90% fluff, but like the moments like where like story stuff happened were really cool.
That series. So there was 3 games, right, on the PS2. There was 3 of them. There was originally supposed to be like 6.
Yeah.
But then they condensed it. So.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine that series being any longer than it was. But
it all stemmed from Xenogears, which was a great but unfinished PS1 RPG.
Yeah, PS1 RPG. Yeah.
If you played it all the way to the end, you're kind of like, what happened there? It's because they didn't really have enough time to finish the game. They had to release it. So
the PS2 was the era of like continual RPGs where like that they had the dot hack series where like you would take like your save file like over to the next like dot hack, quarantine and dot hack.
Same thing with Suikoden 3. You could bring over your save from Suikoden 2, and it doesn't change a lot, but it changed a couple interactions and then a special character you could get.
That's kind of fun.
All right. So here are the ones that we've nominated, and you guys feel free to mention one if we're forgetting anything. We've got 13 Sentinels, Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, Crash Bandicoot 4, Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy 7, Gears Tactics, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, Haven, Immortals, Avengers, Ori, Resident Evil 3, Miles Morales, Star Wars Squadrons, Tell Me Why, Last of Us Part 2, The Pathless, Watch Dogs, and Yakuza. Or is it Yakuza?
Yakuza.
I'm super American, so I say Yakuza.
Well, it's like Caribbean versus Caribbean. Yeah.
I think I say Caribbean.
It's kind of like Tsushima. Because it's said, it's Tsushima. You say it kind of fast.
Tsushima. I always say Ghost
But everybody says Tsushima.
Yeah, but everyone's Tsushima. Yeah.
Tsushima. But the game is like Tsushima. We have to say Tsushima.
They say it all the time, and I'm like, oh, you mean Tsushima?
Yeah, right. So
I don't know what
Tsushima is.
Yeah,
we're like in America, not in this podcast, but...
All right, I think it's safe to move a couple of these over early, so please stop me if I'm jumping the gun here, but I think we're going to be moving over Cyberpunk and Final Fantasy. I'm just looking down through the list here of automatics. I think Ghost of Tsushima will come over.
Nice. Good pronunciation.
Thank you. I think Avengers is going to be in our top, and we might...
Yes.
I'd like us to do it.
I'll fight for this game, dude. I'm telling you.
I think it's a top 10. I think Ori... Did you guys all finish Ori?
Didn't finish Ori, but I'm here to listen for
you guys suck. None of you finished it. Okay. Well, I'm still going to put it over for... Well, you know what? It might go in the middle. We'll see. Let me move all these. Hang on. Dan, tell me about the RE3 story. Is that worth fighting for in top 10?
So, I know how we were saying earlier that it definitely seemed like... I mean, not seems like they did cut like content that would probably be there that was in the original. But I just really like this, I guess, newer rendition of Jill. Because this version of Jill is the first version of her, because it's a remake, so they're like, well, let's kind of like redo Jill like visually, like what she looks like, and just kind of like her personality. It's the most personality I think in a while that we've seen of her, and she's just a badass. It's not kind of like with Leon and Remake 2 kind of just showing up into Raccoon City, obviously not anticipating a freaking zombie outbreak.
Yeah.
And kind of being a newbie. Like she went to the mansion. She was at the Spencer mansion. Like she's already been
at ground
through this.
zero, yeah.
Yeah, so she's kind of already been like already in this situation of like, oh, okay, right, more of these guys. And then she has Nemesis freaking chasing after her. And there's some mention, I don't actually remember it myself, but like the easy like Huber was mentioning a mention of Los Plagas, which is like the virus from Resident Evil 4. So they seem to be planting seeds of like Resident Evil 4, because obviously the rumor is Resident Evil 4 remake will be the next remake.
Yeah.
So they seem to be kind of dropping little things there to kind of connect it to that.
That's cool.
We're retconning
so is this
Code Veronica. Who gives it? Who cares?
Yeah.
Is this new to RE3, or is this what they already did?
I don't think that was in RE. I'm almost 100% sure that was in an RE3 before.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, because I mean, technically, Resident Evil 3 originally was made before Resident Evil 4. Yeah. So they wouldn't have had like the story layout of 4
unless they were going to set it up like back then. But I just don't think that they ever mentioned that virus.
Well, back then it was Resident Evil 3, and then Code Veronica came out, and then it was Resident Evil 4. And technically, Resident Evil 4, like what it ended up being, like I don't know do you guys remember the first trailer for Resident Evil 4?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like Leon running around like this like kind of creepy mansion looking thing, but it was like a ghost. It was like a ghost chasing after him.
They released that like and I thought in one of the versions or something like that, they released that kind of like beta version or whatever, where you could walk around in the mansion. It was like it was the tech demo or whatever.
Yeah. Well, that might have been something that was leaked, but because I think that turned into actually Devil May Cry. Because that's that particular setting from that first trailer, Resident Evil, is basically what Devil May Cry ended up being.
I love when that stuff happens. Ubisoft did that with Prince of Persia and created you created Assassin's Creed, and I just love that stuff.
So similar to that, yeah.
All right, well, you've got me convinced to move it over to this middle category with Ori for now, at least.
It can be low on the list, but I think even though, again, it definitely, they took some stuff out. There were sections in the original game that they clearly didn't like.
The story's all there, though.
Yeah, it didn't come into fruition, but like I think it still does have a decent story. I think it's a really cool portrayal of Jill, and I do think
you get to see Umbrella like agents, like Carlos and everything. Like it's cool. Like you get a lot of layers to this game and a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah, you've got me convinced, if for no other reason, that they're using this opportunity to build out the RE lore in a way that mega fans already kind of knew, but they're connecting the dots in bigger and better ways. Yeah, I like that. I like when all franchises do that. So
yeah, they're clearly taking it into account with like if they're remaking more games and plus the new game, like it might even have a connection to Resident Evil Village. So like we'll see,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, for Ori, I think it deserves a spot on the list for sure. If you found the first story to be impactful, I think the second one has, at least by the end of it, I think it's a very similar impact by the end. We already talked about how the opening isn't quite as emotionally strong.
Right. Yeah.
I think if they had made it just as strong, though, it would have been pretty hack, because they would have just ripped off their own opening. Like, hey, remember when it looked happy and then we made it real sad?
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad they didn't go that direction. By the end of Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and don't worry, I will not spoil exactly what happens, but I'll just say they hit so hard on themes of true friendship and sacrifice in a way that I wasn't expecting. And they also do a good job of kind of wrapping up the story. That doesn't mean they couldn't make more Ori games. I absolutely expect them to. But if this were the only 2 Ori games they make, let's say Moon Studios moves on to make another similar, side-scrolling artistic game with totally different themes and characters, I think that'd be fine. This could wrap it up in a really powerful way. You could say the same thing about the first game too.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the story is really powerful and deserves a spot on the list. And you guys should finish it, if for no other reason, just to see how it all wraps up.
Yeah, because like the first one definitely, it's like a gut punch in the first like 5 minutes, whereas like the second one not so much. But it definitely still has like those emotional overtones that the first one had. And I mean the music really helps with that for sure.
The music is so moving. I think the first game, this is just mild spoilers to like the overall, whether it's a good ending or bad ending. So if you don't even want to know that, then maybe fast forward ahead. But the first game starts out with the gut punch that we've already talked about. Yeah. And Ori is pretty much not even at death's door, or he pretty much dies at the beginning and then is kind of brought back to survive and press on. And then, I don't know if you guys remember that, but his life force is gone and then the tree, whatever. Anyway, and that's how the game starts. And at the end of the game, you guys finished the first Ori?
Yeah.
Again, in general terms, it's a very sappy, sweet, happy ending there at the end. Like, it's just kind of, it's a little...
It's impactful. Because,
it's impactful, but it's a little bit like, it's in such stark contrast to the opening.
Well, right.
It's the kind of thing that at the end, you're just kind of like, oh, good. Everything worked out. It's got that vibe to it. And the sequel starts out with, oh, good. Everything's working out. And even the problem they introduced doesn't seem all that bad. Sure. And at the end, I wouldn't say it's a gut punch in the same way, but it's got this bittersweet moment that I just think is really well done. Yeah. So I'll leave it at that. I think it's an amazing game and deserves to be on the list. I already moved over Last of Us Part 2 and Spider-Man Miles Morales to the obvious list based on what we've talked about in previous weeks. Am I overstepping there? Are we good moving those over?
We're good.
That's good.
We are good.
I know that Kyle and I still haven't played Spider-Man, but we believe you.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to move Ori over.
Miles. Believe in Miles.
It won't be, as high as maybe the first Spider-Man would have been that year that it came out, but
okay.
Because there are aspects of it that are rushed that will knock it down a few pegs. But
well, it's fun because, like, obviously for so many years, people who were fans of Spider-Man before they started kind of creating universes and like other Spider-Men, it's like, oh, well, Peter Parker and Aunt May, and you know that stuff. You just know. Whereas with Miles, I mean, as much of a Spider-Man fan as I am, I didn't really know that much about Miles.
I didn't know anything about him until Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah,
I just knew what his that he was half black, half Hispanic, and that was literally it. Like, that's all I knew.
Into the Spider-Verse made him instantly one of my favorite Marvel characters.
Yeah. The game will only further your love for that character. They do such a good job.
He's been the favorite Spider-Man in comics for like years now too.
Yeah.
So, like, we're all showing up late. It seems like to the party.
That's how we do it.
Yeah.
This is how we do
it. Wow.
You losers.
It's Friday night.
The 90s is a theme this episode.
It really is. It really is, man. All right, so I don't know that we've got enough to move 13 Sentinels into the top 10. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong. I will say this. They do some really cool things, not only with their characters, who are, by the way, very well voice acted. It's not, the whole game isn't entirely voice acted. There's some reading, but a lot of it is. I would say the majority of it is.
Okay.
And it is really well voice acted. The artwork is phenomenal when you're doing the conversations. And even when they're showing you kind of like the cockpit views of the people talking, it's a little awkward at times too, because when they go into the machines, they're totally naked. And so they have cleverly positioned arms and hair covering up body parts.
As anime.
So anime.
It's so Outlaw Star, yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's like, awkward or super inappropriate. It's just so you know, like, that's kind of a weird moment. Yeah. But the artwork is so well done, and it does, to me, it takes away a little bit that they pull back on doing any kind of good visuals for the combat. That's a bummer for me. But that being said, the story that I've played so far, and I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 hours or something like that, really, really intriguing. I don't want to spoil even the main concept of it. So I'm not going to say much more about it because I don't think it's going to make our list because I don't have much.
No, I can't push it either. And I think if you and I had beaten this game, you and I would probably be like cheering for this game hard, just because
probably would be.
The amount of praise I've seen the story get, and how it sticks to landing, and how it actually just gets better, like a crescendo.
I will say this without giving away there's a central core concept that's a pretty familiar storytelling device in a lot of movies and shows, especially in sci-fi. But I won't tell you what it is, just in case, because it is kind of a bit of a surprise, like, oh, that's what they're doing with this. So I thought that was cool. So I won't say what it is, but I will say that there's a great mystery surrounding everything that's going on. Who are you? Who are these people? What's going on? Are we like pawns in some kind of grander scheme of some kind? Like, it's all very intriguing. It's very mysterious.
Without having played any of it, again, I watched the Easy Allies did their Game of the Years, and they definitely mentioned, like, I know like enough about it, like how they explained in certain aspects, that if you guys did want to argue it, I would totally just be like, yeah, for sure.
I don't know enough about it to argue.
I don't know. I can't champion enough. Like, I've played too many hours of these other games where I can
the premise and Act 1 are very strong. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Watch, play it if you like Evangelion.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
If you
like
we're gonna
robots
leave. I think we're gonna leave Watch Dogs Legion off the list, but I just wanted to mention if this game had chosen to go with a central protagonist, I do believe they could have had potential to tell a really strong story.
Mm-hmm.
But since they decided to go with, I shouldn't say nameless because they all have names, but with voice modulated, seemingly randomly generated NPC characters that you could recruit and control. Again, conceptually interesting, storytelling wise, very weak.
I had some real swamp monsters on my team with like voices and like
Yeah.
they're just like really weird, like put together.
It's like when you do a character
faces
creation and hit randomize.
Yeah, and like some of the voices I could tell were the same voice actor, but like their voices were just different octaves and stuff.
Well, there were a couple times where it was mismatched. It would be like some younger, really attractive female, and she has an old lady voice saying, "Oh, I'm not ready to go out to pasture yet," and I'm like,
Yeah,
you look like you're 30. What are you talking about?
I almost wonder
I
if
really
they
did like that system a lot, though. The randomized, like everyone's got their own quirks and little things and stuff like that.
I
that was
finished the
pretty
game.
impressive.
Did you finish the game? Did you get to?
Ew, I got to too many of those hacking line puzzles, and I was like, no, I'm done with this.
I didn't mind those. I know they're not for everybody though, but the overall storyline and even there's a couple of storyline strings to go after. If you look at kind of your progress, you can see I'm 13% through this storyline for this character. So there's a couple of main characters that you have to face off with, and the outcome can vary depending on choices you make. Some of that stuff was really good. I really like. There's a couple of major decisions that are really intense, and you only got a few seconds to make the call on it. And again, if I had a centralized character that was voice acted well, that was someone I feel like I could empathize with, that could have been a really impactful story. But because they chose to do it the way they did it, I can't champion this one on the list. I do think they've got some intriguing story moments, though, to their credit.
There's some cool Ghost in the Machine story. I don't know how much spoilers we want to go into, but yeah, there's some cool Ghost in the Machine stories.
Ghost in the Machine one is very cool. Kind of the final, the final few missions, the person that you're trying to take down, I thought was very good.
Yeah.
Again, story wise, but then I remembered my character is just a robotic,
a construction worker. Who
I almost wonder if they should have gone with like the silent protagonist approach.
Well, what's wrong with having a central character and that person is the one that's recruiting everybody?
Yeah, you can still
know what I mean? So you can still recruit everybody and but your character is the person who's really pushing everything forward,
Yeah, I wish they would have let you have a Marcus or a what's the guy? Aiden. Give me an Aiden or a Marcus as a central.
No one's ever asked
He is
going to
be DLC, so
the most boring character in the history of
still would have been better.
I don't
mind. It would have been better. No, I totally agree with that, which is crazy to me because I would never wish for him to be back, and here we are bring him back because what we got was not great.
hey, he's going to be DLC, so
that's true.
Wish granted.
So he gets to be just another faceless person in your army.
Well, Jeff, what do you think about the Pathless story? Was that strong enough to you? Was it just kind of
really? I mean, it's just kind of it's a very much a background type thing where you have to piece it together. Just using, I mean, I love stories that are show don't tell. Those are some of my favorite kinds. But where it's you don't really have dialogue explaining to you every single step along the way. You kind of have to figure out through as the game reveals itself to you.
The main dialogue was the villain talking to you, right?
Yeah.
Most of the dialogue.
Yeah.
To me, this came across as like a myth or a legend kind of being told in a video game, where it's not a lot of character depth or crazy twists and turns.
Yes.
It's just here's this old legend from this tribe somewhere.
And a lot of the story and background too depends on how much you're willing to explore and read, because there are a lot of corpses and stuff around, and you can read their last thoughts or something like that, or I don't know what it is. They're
and some of them are really sad. It's like, hey, I think we've got a chance here, and it's his dead body. He was just killed right after.
Oh man, it's so heartbreaking stuff. Yeah. But yeah, I mean that a lot of it really depends on how much you're willing to explore, I guess.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it's top 10 for this year, but it was interesting.
Great game though. Yeah.
So
I would fight for, since Ori kind of made it based on, Derek would fight for it too. I'm 100% certain on that. He would fight for it in 10. But I know I'm the only one that played Tell Me Why, but I have to be passionate about that game.
Okay.
Because the true mark of a good story, especially one that's episodic like that, to me is at the end of there's only 3 episodes, but at the end of the first 2 episodes, it was this cliffhanger, and I would be like, cool, where's the next episode? I need a stat, because it's just it paces out its story so well. You know how, for me at least, when I was playing the Life is Strange games, both of them, the second one more so than the first one, there was like so many slow moments of like, why am I doing this? Let's go back to the main story bit. And I felt like there was like none of that. And tell me why. Everything you're doing is geared towards the story.
Gotcha.
And there's only 3 episodes too, right?
Yeah.
So they kind of cut out some of the fluff.
And they did. They kind of had to, because the story too is compelling on its own, because the twins that you're playing as are trying to solve the death of their mother. It's not really a murder. I mean, I guess it is. It's kind of a murky area. It's a gray area.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. They're trying to, and the person that ended up taking them in is the sheriff, or at least taking one of them in. Is the sheriff. So like he's being cagey about the details too. They're trying to, like, the whole town is trying to like not corrupt this idea that the twins have of their mother.
Gotcha.
So they're trying to really get to the bottom of like what happened with their mother, because the twins were there for the death. And then there's like this big reveal at the end that was like, I was just like, my palms are sweaty.
Mom's
spaghetti.
Mom's spaghetti.
But my palms were like legitimately sweaty, because I was like, oh, what's gonna happen? Like, it was just like one of the first times in a long time that I was like, I'm so pumped for this reveal. That story was just so good to me.
That's a good sales pitch on that one. I'm intrigued by that.
I'm glad that one worked out versus Twin Mirror, because I didn't even actually finish that, and that was only 4 hours long.
Game is super short, right? And you shouldn't be able to just plow right through it, but it's so freaking boring.
Yeah, I hear that the game is just awful.
I was so mad, because it seemed super interesting, but it just ended up not being interesting.
Oh yeah, here it is. We should bring it over.
Hey, since we found it.
Replace
they have the Mind Palace.
Yeah.
He had a Mind Palace, and it was like the most boring Mind Palace you could imagine.
How could you make a Mind Palace boring? Like,
and it looked
that's
cool.
Awesome. Like,
it looked cool. It did, but
And the voice acting even seemed bored.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna leave Ori right there beside Resident Evil and tell me why, because it's one of 3 that are getting passionate cases made by one person. So we'll kind of leave it there on the side for now. We've got 3 that are, I feel like, still pretty obviously on the list. I'm sorry, 6 that are obvious on the list. Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy, Ghost, Avengers, Spider-Man, Last of Us Part 2. Those feel obvious to me to be somewhere in the top 10. And then we've got Resident Evil, Tell Me Why, and Ori that are sitting in the wings. Maybe they'll all 3 make it. We'll see. I'm okay with not putting Gears Tactics on the top 10, but I will say this. If you have played and enjoyed Gears stories in the past, I highly recommend that you play this one. If you like Gears, if you like the lore, it's really, really great. The story is really cool. It's a bit of a prequel. I just like
shooting people in Gears. I really don't pay attention. It's like the Halo for me. I really don't pay attention to those stories, man.
Yeah, both of those have cool lore, but you don't necessarily have to get into it to enjoy the games. So, Halo's got some cool lore too. But anyway,
yeah, Halo's definitely more lore than story for sure. For me, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Than Gears. Yeah. I don't necessarily feel the need to put Hades over here for story, although I do like the concept. Do any of you feel passionate about moving Hades over?
I don't have to bring it over, but
no, I think it's a good idea for the gameplay. That's why I like the story a lot.
Me too. Yeah, it's got great dialogue too in between runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love some of the trash talk.
But there is no technically. I didn't finish the game, but there is technically no real arc, right? Because he's doing. There is. Okay.
There's a whole story. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think it's worth finishing. If you've played it, and I stopped for a while and went back to it, I do think it's worth seeing kind of the storyline as well as experiencing the game itself. I think it's worth seeing through to the end. Cool. And it's one that I know it's easy to get frustrated on those games, but I would say every time you die, think of it as this is what the developer wanted me to do. They want me to die to experience new things back at the home base, upgrade a little bit, get a little better, and then go try again. Yeah. They want you to do that. They don't want you to finish it on your first run and be done. Like, there's a lot they want you to experience in between. So I do think Haven is a really strong story. But I'm not quite finished with it yet, so I can't confirm that it finishes on a high note. But I love the setting. I love kind of the Star-Crossed. Are they Star-Crossed lovers? Do they fit that definition?
Yeah,
sure.
I would say so. right?
I think so. I played about 2 hours of it. That makes
It's not quite as powerful to say it's like a Romeo and Juliet thing, but sort of. They live in a society that clearly matches people up through this thing or person called the matchmaker. So they go against the grain because they've met and fell in love. They're ignoring who they're matched with, and they run away in her spaceship. And they're on this planet called Source, and they're just trying to survive. And it helps that it's gorgeous, and I love the music. Yeah. And the gameplay is like, to me, it's like relaxingly repetitive. Some people don't like it because it's repetitive.
No, I love. Yeah, it was a good break from intense gaming.
Yes,
when I first started.
You literally just kind of like, it's almost like skiing around. It's almost like you can ski any direction. Yeah. I kind of compare it to that because that's what it feels like as you're gliding everywhere.
And collecting, and then you're for meals and stuff like that. Yeah.
So if you think about what makes a good story, there's so many different components. We're all going to have different opinions. I feel like this one's got a strong story because the characters are so strong. The setting and the kind of the world they build there is interesting, not super unique. We've seen kind of sci-fi futuristic societies like this before, but the fact that they chose to focus in on just these two people, they're not taking you to the big city where you have to go fight. You know, you're not building a rebellion to go fight against the man. You're just two people who are kind of selfishly, and they actually talk about that, wanting to just live their lives on their own, just the two of them. And there's some, as the story progresses, there's some real interesting conflict that comes up, some unintentional connection with their past that comes up. It's really good. I think it's a really great story. I'm just not finished with it yet. So
I'd probably be championing it with y'all if I'd play a little more of it. But I like the whole idea of it kind of being like, oh, it's this romance game, but y'all are already in a relationship. Now it's about like...
I do like that too, yeah.
Yeah, it's not about like getting the girl. It's about like, y'all already in love. Like, what's the story after that? And
it allows them to have some really great banter, and they can tease each other, which feels very real-life relationship to me as they're kind of bantering back and forth. But it also takes the pressure off of like, oh, which answer gets me to like be able to sleep with them in the game?
Yeah, you're already doing that, baby.
And so it removes that element completely, and it's more about surviving together and then trying to build your confidence. Like answering a certain way can build a character's confidence, which can.
I do love that aspect of it too. That's definitely big part of the story. So you decide how they feel about themselves and each other.
Crash Bandicoot 4 has a very funny Saturday morning cartoon vibe to it. It's worth at least mentioning that it's a fun story, especially for kids. They reintroduce some old villains. Some of their interactions and cackling it's funny if you're hanging out with kids. So like all of my kids are sitting around watching this. We pass the controller, taking turns playing it. And so it was like goofy in the same way Ratchet and Clank's story was goofy and silly and fun. Not one of the top 10 stories of the year for being very serious about it, but it is very fun and silly. Not unlike even something like Battletoads that actually has some pretty good tongue-in-cheek humor once you get to a certain point. You're like, oh, I see what they're doing. That's kind of clever. I put it in the same boat as that, where it's good for the right audience. It's just not my favorite.
It's trash Bandicoot. Let's call it what it is.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow.
Gaston's gonna set you on fire.
I don't care. I don't care.
I'm so sorry, Gaston.
Gaston is lighting his torch. He's going to cover you in gasoline.
I was already mean about Doom, and now you're being mean about Crash, and it's just a bad day.
He's just raging.
And I'm pretty sure Gaston likes Doom Eternal also, so he's just curious.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Gaston, if you're still listening to this episode, I want it to be clear that I like Crash Bandicoot 4, okay?
I do too. I didn't play it, but I like Crash Bandicoot in general. I think it's
Tim's on your side here. Okay.
I remember the old commercials where he's standing outside at like Nintendo Studios and like with a megaphone and like screaming at them. It's good stuff.
Classic, man. Classic. Now, do we need to bring over Call of Duty? Jeff, you're the only one who's played this still, I think.
Oh, no, I really didn't expect it to make the best story. I mean, I just think the premise itself is really cool because it's kind of rooted in this real life story of a KGB agent. That was like, I mean, I forget the name of it now because it's been so long since I played the game. Or, I mean, it's been so many games since I played the game, I should say.
Yeah, right.
But I think that premise is super rad of like a very real like code name, and they're trying to like put a face to it. One that like interrupted so many operations in like Vietnam and stuff like that. Yeah, I just think that was really cool. If I'd finished it, I would probably be championing it pretty hard because I heard the story's really good. The single player campaign's really good.
Okay, but it doesn't sound like there's enough there to push it over.
Yeah, if I had beaten it, man, I would be probably singing his praises a little
There's a
harder.
couple we haven't talked about yet. Let me just bring them over real quick.
I mean, does Activision deserve an award? I mean, let's be honest. Do they deserve an award?
They have an award. It's called money. So
yeah, I was gonna say, don't they have plenty of money?
Yeah, they sure
That's
do.
a good point. So some of the ones we've discussed but are not moving into our top 10: 13 Sentinels, Call of Duty, Crash Bandicoot 4, Gears Tactics, Hades, The Pathless, and Watch Dogs Legion. Mm-hmm. And then 4 that we haven't really discussed yet, and just kind of to get a quick feel for the room, is anyone going to fight for these? I do think Assassin's Creed is a great story, and there's enough moments in there that I would say they told a great story in this series of missions, and they told a great story over here. I do see the weakness overall in how they've decided to stretch this thing out over 80, 90 hours for most people. So it does not come off as a strong storyline. I do think it's still well told and amazingly acted. The voice acting is fantastic, of course.
Yes, yeah.
And the writing is really good. And when you get to those major story moments, it can be like, whoa, that was fantastic. There's a whole storyline with Ivar, or Ivar, however you say his name, that's really intriguing and well done. There's some stuff with Sigurd, both in the middle and then later in the game that I think is fascinating. You have to make some choices there. But I can see why it might not be everyone's favorite. If I had to pick, for example, the two that I championed, Ori and Haven, it'd be tough for me to decide. I'd probably put Ori in if I had to pick out of those 3. I think Ori makes the case.
The way that I see it, we have 6 on round 3 already.
Yeah.
So if you're comparing Resident Evil 3 down to Haven, and then you look at the other 4, I guess, to me, it's like, well, are these 4 bottom ones stronger than the 10 that we basically already have?
If I had another sane person with me to champion Yakuza, we would all be talking about how that's top 3.
Yakuza not an obvious one? Yeah. I don't understand that.
I unfortunately haven't played it, but I've heard great things.
I think the stories in all of those games that's the point of those games, is that they're telling a story, they're literally story games,
Yep.
But I don't know. I know they're not everybody's cup of tea for sure.
I haven't taken time to play it much more since we last talked, so I'm still relatively early in that game.
Mm-hmm.
I know the premise is good, the characters are fun.
I think none of us have experienced enough of it to maybe.
That's all it is. That's all it is for me. Everything I've played of it is quality. To me, it's the same as 13 Sentinels. It's like, boy, I probably could fight for this one more, but I just didn't take enough time to play it.
And that's the thing with Valhalla, for example. I played 80 something hours of that, so I did play it front to back. Yeah. And I don't think it's stronger than the 10 potentially that we have there. So.
And that's fair. That's totally fair. Yeah.
And there's some excellent moments, but then it's then there's all the other hours that I was running around, and it's like, for the love of God.
Yeah, this isn't best story moments, right? Where you get to highlight one section of a game and say this moment's the best. This is overall best story. And so I see the knocks against Assassin's Creed. They chose to break it up in that way, and that's their call. So
Yakuza feels like a complete story from start to finish, and it has a definitive ending, and they could never do another game like with this person, and everyone would.
Did you finish Like a Dragon?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I beat that game in like a week. Yeah. I love that game. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, I'm moving this one up with the other ones we've been fighting for up here.
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed and Immortals, by the way. I think Immortals has some clever storytelling components to it.
So it's a funny and funny conceit. Yeah.
Don't think it's one of the top. To me, it's similar to Hades in that, not just because it's the same mythology, which is just a coincidence, honestly. But it's similar to Hades in that it's got a great premise, really good writing, and fun delivery. Some cool back and forth moments, but not necessarily a compelling, I gotta see what happens next storyline, in my opinion.
No. I think it's just more like a fun story, but it's mainly about kind of the open world and the fun combat. So
yeah. I mean, it is cool. I mean, again, the storytelling device they use where you've got Zeus and Pythagoras talking back and forth, and as they're telling the story, one of them might change it on the other one. Like, no, there was a chicken. No, there was a Cyclops. And he was tiny, and then the Cyclops shrinks. Yeah. It's just very clever. And it kind of adds a really fun element to what normally would be a serious story.
But did it make you cry, Tim? That's the real question.
Not yet, but I'm...
Not like Journey did, but...
Yeah. Just bringing up Journey's name makes me verklempt.
So I'm willing to let go of Assassin's Creed, although I think Derek might help me fight for it a little bit. But what about Star Wars Squadrons? I'll let you guys who have played it Is that
I wish I
long?
finished that
Story, but
campaign, man.
I don't know if we're. I would champion that game all day, but like we're talking about a solid like possible 10 good stories here, and while
This
Star Wars
is-
Squadron just shows up and delivers, I don't know if it like
Mhm.
excels anything story wise in its genre.
As far as like, because a lot of these Star Wars games that we've played, I mean, I guess Jedi is maybe an exception. There's like a lot of like defection stories and stuff. So
Yeah.
up as far as Star Wars defecting, like characters defecting and changing side stories go, is this like better than the Battlefront 2 story, or like?
I know people hate the Battlefront 2 story, but I thought that story was actually awesome.
I did too.
And
So.
I think that story is actually way better than the story.
That story is better than this one, and it's more compact, which I think kind of helps.
Yeah.
I didn't think the Star Wars Squadron stories was that great compared to other Star Wars stories that we've got.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
the
don't
game
either.
and the combat was better than the stories. So
I think so too. I think the moments that they put you in and the battles that you're in are cooler than the story that's going on. But the fact that there was a story in that game at all was just kind of impressive to me.
Didn't need to be there at all. I really thought it was just going to be a generic, like, just go in matchmaking and have fun.
Hey, you happen to be a random pilot in this squad. Now here's a bunch of random missions to go attack or defend stuff. But they didn't do that. They decided to attach some really cool missions to it and the characters to it as well. I'm going to move Assassin's Creed off, and that really just gives us 11. But I do think, again, for me personally, Assassin's Creed's up there pretty high. But the fact that there's others who have played it at length and aren't fighting for it with me tells me all I need to know. Like, yeah, on a shared ranked list, though, this won't belong, even though I feel like it would on my list. So the only one of these five.
Well, I mean, I thought Derek, like this past week, was saying that he could just be Dereking and trolling. But I thought he was saying that he's at a point now, he's so far in the game that it's getting so long that he's just skipping everything that everybody's saying.
Well, he does that all the time, so.
So I don't even know if he could fight for the story because it's so freaking long.
It is. It's too much. It's too much. By the way, it's
the little bit that I saw though was amazing.
A little bit.
I kept hitting skip, and all of a sudden, everyone around me was dead.
Yeah.
You're like Thanos at the end of Endgame. Like, I don't even know who you are.
I don't know what happened, but I guess I'm done with this game now. So, but yeah, I think it's strong. But we can move on from that. Resident Evil 3. Tell me why. Ori, Haven, and Yakuza. Right? Did I say it? Yakuza. All right.
Yakuza.
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 Based on the arguments I think we've heard, I mean, I've got no problem. Maybe it's recency bias because I just heard Kyle talking about it. I think Yakuza should be over there, so I'm okay with moving Yakuza.
I think if I was gonna say the two weakest ones on this list, it might be Haven and Resident Evil 3.
I'm a big champion for Resident Evil 3, but I wouldn't mind it falling off because while it's got like great moments and there's some cool stuff going on, it doesn't really push the lore of like the whole Resident Evil ethos forward. Not too much. Like there's some cool perspectives that you get.
I totally agree with that.
It does, but again,
it does, but not.
We don't know where it's going yet, though.
But not in the way that other ones have. Sure. You know what I mean? I think it's a little more focused. Which
I personally feel like we should have just like one remake on the best story list, in my opinion.
Well, I mean,
and I feel like the Final Fantasy one took more risks than the Resident Evil.
Here's the thing, though. Even though 7 Remake has the word remake in the title, it might not even be potentially a remake. Just saying.
More of a redo.
We'll get to that.
So, I mean, it might not even really be what you think it is. So.
It's more of a redo. Let's try this again.
More than that, Tim.
More of a happening again, maybe even.
So tell me why, which Jeff really sold me on. I already knew it would be good. I just haven't played it yet. Tell me why in Ori, are we okay moving those over onto this?
I mean, I am. I mean, I know that Ori, like if Derek were here, he would be fighting really hard for that game.
And then we can decide together between Haven and RE3, or we just make it a top 11, whatever.
We could just throw a vote. We could just do that's what the easy allies do. They just say, all right, well, if we can't decide between these two things, let's vote or something.
So
I like that idea.
It seems to me like Haven and Resident Evil 3 at the bottom, which is interesting because 2 of us have played one of them and 2 of us have really played the other one. But based on the arguments that were made, I do think there was a strong argument there for RE3. I would have wrote off 3 for story completely. I'll be honest with you.
Same.
I'm not a Resident Evil hater. I'm really not.
I'm not either, honestly.
I enjoy it for what it is, but I've never been that big of a fan of that type of genre. But that being said, Dan, you made a really good case for RE3 and how they're tying in their games.
I was just more making a case for it like being on the list at all. I would say it would definitely be closer to the bottom if I was going to throw it against, a list of other games like these games. But that's just me personally. Like it would be towards the bottom.
I do think if you had played Haven, being the big anime fan that you are, you would fall in love with it.
The second I saw a trailer for that, like I think it was like 2-3 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to play this, but I just haven't.
And it just came out on Switch, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's free on Game Pass. Okay. So, Kyle, what about you? Let's start with you, because I know that you like RE3. Based on the arguments that were made, how are you feeling as objectively as we can here? Which one do you think? As
objectively as I can, I will be objective. Okay, so RE3 I really enjoy. I love the story of like Resident Evil. I think the lore is really good. What I played of Haven and where y'all are kind of telling me it goes and the things that it kind of tackles and stuff like that, I would say that probably has a better chance of being more in line with like best story list, because it again like I was like the pitch I gave for Yakuza, it sounds like it's a story game. And there's some light mechanics to like give you some gameplay, but really it's all about getting back to that ship and talking to your lady, or talking to your man, whoever you're
all playing. The other mechanics, they include the cooking and the crafting and the combat, they're all so simplistic, but I'm grateful for that, because then it can just really focus in on the visuals, the audio, and really the big part is the story.
So I feel like we have to give. And I love cheering for the little mans and stuff like that, who are just like, we're just here to tell a story, and like they want to do it in this format and stuff like that. And I would be all about championing that. So for me, if we're going vote wise, I would go towards Haven.
Okay, Jeff, is that where you're leaning to?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know how much, because I didn't play the original. Resident Evil was like, I jumped on at 7. When they started doing things differently. So I didn't know how different
started to do things differently. So I'm right there with you.
Really, how different is the story in 3 than it was when it first came out? Like,
well, like that they're all pretty different, because like for the most part, well, I guess the first two it was the same virus, but then like they started expanding the universe in the sense that there's other viruses, there's other sort of bioterrorist things happening in the world. It wasn't just like the stuff at Spencer Mansion. I guess there's kind of more going on in the world than literally just that one city, which was sort of like the ground zero of I want to say the T virus was the first
T-virus outbreak, yeah. Well, there was a few. There was the G virus and the T virus. There were a few outbroke there in that city. Yeah.
But like once the series started going on, like they started expanding. Like with Resident Evil 4, for example, they have the Los Plagas, which is like a totally different virus, and in these newer Resident Evil games, there's clearly a different virus going on. So they kind of just started like, diverging in different directions, these different viruses that do different things, and sort of like, was it a bioweapon sort of stuff? Because at first it was like, oh, this is a zombie series. And then it kind of turned into more like, oh, like,
no,
there's
like
these
genetically
companies,
engineered, weaponized.
These companies are creating these like bioweapons to sort of sell on the black market to do this stuff, but then like obviously things go wrong, and then the bioweapons break out, and then those are the enemies that you're fighting. So
It's got a really good story. The whole series has a great story. It gets a little nutty sometimes, but like I think every game kind of like brings a new kind of perspective or layer to the entire like series. And
is it fair to say that the main story beats match up with the original game, despite the new twists and kind of additions to tie things together? Is it fair to say the main story beats?
I thought it did. I don't know. Yeah. Dan, you may have a little more information.
I mean, for me personally, like at this, but like like some people are always going to kind of pick the original with some of these games just because of nostalgia, and it's just like, well, this is just what the definitive version is to me. But like Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake to me are now the definitive versions. I just think that they sort of expanded on things a bit better, and it helps having like these actual cutscenes with like good voice acting and just kind of like explaining things a little better, because like, we're in a more modern era of gaming, so like, when they're kind of writing the story, they're kind of maybe thinking about things a little differently than back then when the technology wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
So
well, like sense. That in Resident Evil 2, where you like rescue that like cop like at the very beginning of entering in the the police station or whatever, plays out much differently in remake than it did, and that it's the same concept.
Well, he's like expanded. Yeah, he actually like totally has a personality.
Absolutely, they did a lot more, and I don't know if there's a lot of that in 3, but I think there's enough of it where they make the story just I don't know, seem more
well,
vibrant.
Like Carlos is
like,
Carlos is way more like of a fleshed out person, and
like you said,
remake,
Jill is
so.
too, though. Like they just did a good job of making these people feel like people. So like as we go forward and see these people again, like they're probably gonna have these personalities, not like the personalities like they probably shared in like the originals. So
yeah.
I would say yes, these are the definitive versions now.
For the sake of moving us on to start ranking these things, I'm gonna channel the spirit of Derek and say this game is even worse than RE5 and 6, and it doesn't belong on the list. So
I hate him so much.
I closed my eyes and I could actually feel him here.
I mean, really though,
this is super close, but I do think Haven gets the edge for a number of reasons. One, I think more of us are leaning that way, but also I want to give it the advantage just because it's a brand new original story. I'm not trying to say RE3 doesn't do cool new things and it's not the definitive edition. I get it. That is really neat, especially if you love that whole storyline and all that lore. I just think Haven does something totally unique and new, and I think it gets the edge. Not by a lot, but it gets the edge.
I just wanna punch Derek in the ovaries for saying Resident Evil 6 is better than 3 remake.
Yeah, I'll probably die mad about that one.
Well, that's just on par with his Final Fantasy 15's better than 7 remake. I mean, come on.
He's such a clown.
Barely even has a story that makes sense. Like, come on. Like, let's
all right. So these three. So Jeff, tell me why in Haven. Like to me, I clearly prefer Haven because I haven't really played. Tell me why. What do you think? Where would you just story wise?
Oh, well, the story is far more present in Tell Me Why. Haven involves a lot more collecting and stuff like that, which is cool. I mean, we're just talking about story here. But yeah, Tell Me Why is like, man, the pacing of that story is just. I was very, very impressed with how well they paced out this story.
I gotta go.
I didn't feel like I was doing any bull crap, like let's go find a locker for some reason thing. Life is Strange. I don't know. I'm just very impressed that the dev like really like tightened their storytelling on that game.
So I think it's fair to leave Tell Me Why. I mean, Haven just barely made the cut with RE3, so I think we leave Tell Me Why above it. The only there's two right above Tell Me Why, Yakuza and Ori, that I think we have to kind of hash out because Kyle's the only one who played Yakuza all the way through. I played it a little bit and can confirm. Similar with 13 Sentinels, what I've done so far, super interesting, really fun, very charming.
Yeah.
But even if they do the best version of what I've played so far for the rest of the game, I still don't see myself picking it over Ori. But I could be missing something. I think Ori just hits all the feels. Again, in the way it wraps up, I don't want to oversell it. You might play it and be like, yeah, that was all right, Tim. But I think you'll all love it if you play it all the way to the end. I think Will of the Wisp has a great...
From what I gather with Yakuza, and obviously Kyle can speak more to it because he's actually played it front to back, is Yakuza's very strong character game. Like there's a very strong cast of characters. Whereas
there really is, yeah.
Ori does have like other characters, like, but it's Ori's journey, right? Whereas Yakuza, like, there is the main character and it's his journey, but there's like the ensemble cast that kind of like adds to it.
There's so many people in that. Yeah, there's
a mechanic.
Every side person has its own thing going on.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. Like, and there's a mechanic within Yakuza where you actually go to a bar to just hang out with your friends and like Persona style forward your social link, if you will, or your connection level with them and stuff like that. And like those are all stories. Like you sit there and talk at the bar and you have some drinks or whatever, and they divulge a piece of their like past with you, and that turns into like a mission later as like you keep on doing this over and over again. And you do this with all the characters, and like Jeff was saying, like everybody you meet on the street and everybody like you run into, like they have a story, and like they come up as like side quests or like side missions, I think they're called. And like they may have multiple of them, so like you might run into them later, and like they're up to no good again, or they're in trouble again, or something, and they have to help them again. And then not even to mention like the kart racing that you can do. Every single character is like some gigantic, loud, vibrant, bright, like ridiculous cartoon character of a kart racer. And like you have all these rivalries with them and stuff like that, and like that's its own story, within the major story.
There's also the mysterious guy who sends you on recycling runs to go gather all the recycling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, while
he's got like this mask. He looks like a really cool JRPG character, but he's just letting you borrow his bike and trailer to go pick up recycling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything has like a depth to it that's like very fun to like explore. And I think I every year that I'm on this podcast, there's always a Yakuza game. I'm always saying the same thing.
There's something about this one though. It's even when you play it for, I don't know, the first 4 hours or so, you're still in that prologue before it does like a time jump and it kind of settles you into the main core of the game.
You're not even
I'm
the
very
main
happy
city
with that
yet
though.
until way later.
And I think to me again that speaks a lot to how strong and consistent the story is over a massive game.
Yeah.
And it's, by the way, it's not gonna be for everybody. There are some who will play this and they won't like the style or how kind of over the top, cheesy, and purposefully so some of the line delivery is and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be, it's a stylistic choice.
It's a comedy game, dude. I really think we're underselling how these are written to be funny.
And that's what I was gonna say. Like every moment that like you're laughing at, or it's over the top, or it's ridiculous, there's a moment down the line that's equal parts, if not 10 times as dramatic or heart wrenching or whatever.
Yeah.
So like they do this teeter-totter effect of like betrayal and friendship and love and hate, and like it's so bizarre how
the main character is like endearingly sincere and stupid, but in a good way. Like he's just like
he's like a good
bull rush headfirst
like
into
kind
every
of a
situation.
badass, and I don't know.
Yeah. I think that one lands above Ori. The question then becomes, and I kind of reshuffled some of these just for some comparison's sake.
Respect
I kind of want to compare Avengers to Yakuza because I think Ori's going to land at the 8th spot because I'm the only one fighting for it, and I think that's still a good spot for it. What about Avengers and Yakuza? You played both, Kyle.
I did.
Where do you think these two land?
For me, I would say Yakuza, just because I'm just I might as well take it as far as I can. But Marvel's got a great story. I'm not gonna sit here if everyone since we all played this one,
I really enjoyed Marvel's Avengers story.
I think the story in this game is outstanding. Yeah. I think that it is broken up in ways that are kind of gross, but like the story in general, if you just take it like cutscene for cutscene, moment for moment, like it's just really cool, and the twists are really cool, and the performances are awesome. Talk about the Avengers of like voice casting, they're the best voice actors in the industry are voicing these characters. Everything is sold really, really well. And I mean, Avengers is awesome. I was telling, it's a 10 out of 10 story.
That's more up my alley in terms of like if I were to sit down and choose a story to an audiobook or a TV show, I would 10 times out of 10 pick a Marvel Avengers thing over a Yakuza story. Although I might be convinced, I'm in the mood, I'll give it a shot. But that's just my personal preference. I just enjoy that type of storytelling and acting a lot more. It's more sincere. And when there are funny moments, it's more like shots that Tony Stark is taking at somebody. But in general, it's a serious story. And Yakuza, like you said, does have serious moments. I've gotten to a few of those that are like, whoa, why did he just do that? Or whatever. But still, overall, it feels... So far, in my experience with Yakuza, I haven't played any of the other ones at length. Just a little bit here and there. I feel like it's like an inside joke that I'm missing out on most of the time. And so that's a problem for me when I'm trying to experience this story. I feel like, what am I missing? And with Marvel's Avengers, you can make an argument the story is very on the nose. They kind of explain to you exactly what's happening as it's happening.
It's very focused, yeah.
But that's comic booky, and that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it.
That's why I love. Yeah, I'm a big time Marvel. I'm biased towards Marvel, dude. This story was just right up my alley. When I finished it, I was like, yes.
So to me, I put Marvel just above Yakuza, and that says a lot because I've only played Yakuza for a little while, and I finished Marvel. Marvel's Avengers, to me, can't go much higher than this spot, in my personal opinion, because we just complained about Assassin's Creed not knowing how to properly tell their story in the right pacing. I think Marvel's Avengers interrupts great pacing. It's got this incredibly fantastic first.
Doesn't do it far as frequently though.
It doesn't
at all.
Well, it kind of does. So like you start out in first act and it's nonstop action and story, and oh my word, I love the main character. What a dramatic moment. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? Who did we just find here? And then all of a sudden it goes into this, I felt like, very mixed up and sporadic approach to, you can do story if you want, or you didn't do these quests, and it interrupts it in a way that I found, because I also, here's the other problem. They have all these side quests, and I know they're going to attach interesting side story moments to it. And so I don't want to miss that stuff, but I don't want to play those missions either. So that's where I kind of had an issue with the Marvel's Avengers approach. But I do give it the edge over Yakuza, just barely. From what you guys have told me about Spider-Man, which we haven't talked about at all tonight yet, I feel like Spider-Man's going to be a much more cohesive story experience. And
that one I experienced more emotions. Not like full on crying or anything, but I experienced more emotional highs and whatnot.
Hang on, let me beat Derek for a second. Oh my god!
Just roll your eyes a bunch of times.
Just obviously get on my phone or start playing a game off on the side.
I step away for like 2 seconds, and Avengers is above Yakuza and Ori. I mean, what's going on here?
Well, so I had trouble putting Ori any higher. I mean, I'll put it higher. I'll put Ori up in the top 3 if you let me. But I'm the only one who finished it and was making the case for it. I assumed it can't go too much higher, and I'm okay giving Yakuza the edge based on just the unbelievably epic scale that it goes after. It's a huge game, and it covers a ton of time and ground and characters. I think the characters is what won me over. The description of how unique and interesting each character is. They really are. And I've only met, I think, maybe a fourth of the characters I'm going to meet. So, yeah.
I guess it just depends on what you, like, latch onto in a story.
Correct.
For me, like, Ori is more my style of story. Whereas, the Avengers story was definitely the highlight of the game. I still feel like overall it just wasn't as strong as, like, Ori for me.
Yeah.
But
honestly, to me, Ori is my number 3, I think. Nope, it's my number 4. So I've got Ori up pretty high. And yeah, it's above.
Yeah, I thought Avengers was a fantastic coming of age story from a game I didn't expect one from.
Similar with like Miles, like I knew nothing of Miss Marvel, and then I played this game. I'm like, oh well, she's endearing. Then she's pretty cool. So
Yeah, and the game starts with her, and then it's like her big moment, and it's not really like much of a spoiler because they build up to it, and if you've seen any comic book material at all, you know how a game's that's gonna end. But like she's got her big moment at the end too. So I mean, it's just such a.
I also think there's a certain mission that takes you to space that I found to be amazing.
I love that. Yeah.
That whole sequence and then what's revealed and then how it plays out. I thought that was so cool. Like I thought that was so movie-esque and very cool.
There's a part right before that too that I absolutely adored. Felt like straight out of the movies. I got chills actually when it happened. Was when their helicarrier got attacked, and Thor is just among the the plebes and stuff.
He's even got like a name tag on.
Yeah, he's got his Donald Blake name tag on, and he summons his hammer and then flies up there, and I'm like, yes! It was just such a cool like fanboy moment. Yeah, dude. That whole battle was so much fun.
That battle was great. The space section was great. The final boss battle really felt like I was a little kid watching Saturday morning cartoons all over again.
Yeah, you kept switching characters, and you had to like parkour your way around certain parts of the map.
As weak as I feel like the game was in terms of making every character feel fun and worth using all the time, the final battle brought out their strengths and was fun. So and I like that storyline. So to me, Marvel's Avengers, I think it finished 5, so it was behind Ori for me personally, but on our shared ranked list, I felt like Kyle and Jeff both think pretty highly of it, and so I think that's why I let Ori stay below it, since they didn't finish Ori. So. Right now, that's our bottom half.
Y'all too as well, like if you, I mean, put Ori above Avengers if y'all can make
I mean, I finished Avengers where I haven't even finished Ori. It's just Ori just speaks to me more like I do like the more emotional stories. So whereas there's definitely a level of a level of emotion with Avengers, just because with Miss Marvel, I mean, she's like a teen, she runs away from home, like that kind of aspect, and then she's joining like the superhero team, like these these veteran superheroes, like all that was really cool. So
Ori does give me the feels through and through, no doubt about it. And then there's also moments in Avengers, the moments that got me the most in Avengers, all of them were Miss Marvel and her dad, all of them.
I was gonna say it's her and her stuff with her dad.
Those are the ones that got me the most. He was great. I loved their interaction.
Those phone calls that she would have to make to him, I'm like, ugh.
Yeah. The rest of it was just kind of like pretty standard, but fun Marvel movie story stuff. But it was still really good. Yeah, really well done.
You accept the story as like, because it's Marvel's Avengers, so you expect every character to get like a fair shake at a story. But they're kind of the writers kind of play on you knowing the main 6 Avengers that they have in it. So the story is really about Miss Marvel, and then. Like, I mean, her growth as a character and and her dynamic with Bruce. And then the other characters are just in there, and it's about just reviving this dead entity, the Avengers. So I mean, the fact that the other guys don't really get, I mean, maybe Tony gets a little bit of more of a story than everybody else.
Of course,
naturally.
Of course. Yeah.
But yeah, once you accept it as like, oh, this is Miss Marvel's story, and it's about her and Bruce and stuff like that. Yeah, you know, because he was the one that betrayed them, right? Bruce.
Yeah.
On the
in the court hearings. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's some good tension they build there too, and it's helped by, of course, the voice acting is fantastic. The performance.
Yeah, voice acting.
At first, I was like, why would they cast? I think Troy Baker as Bruce.
Yeah, they have Troy. They have.
So
Troy
I was like, why would they
Nolan
cast
North.
Troy as Bruce? That's so he could be like Thor,
and then Nolan
maybe, or
plays
something. But
Tony Stark, doesn't he?
But that's because those two are button heads the entire game, and they're so good against each other.
What's also cool is I actually didn't realize the absolute dynamite voice cast they got for this game. I didn't realize. I didn't put it together. I just started playing the game when it came out, and it wasn't until there's a scene when you've encountered Bruce, and he's back to Bruce mode. He's not Hulk mode anymore, and he's talking to you. Try not to give anything away here, but there's a moment where you're both walking around talking, and he is talking to you over the radio and says, he calls her kiddo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
it's like, oh,
for some reason in that moment, that's the moment that it clicked. Like, oh, that's Troy Baker. Like, that totally was the kiddo line from Last of Us. 100%.
Just without the Southern accent. You know?
I don't know if he did or not, but to me, I heard it. As soon as he said kiddo, I totally heard Joel saying it.
Yeah.
And that gave me all the feels there too, of course. But
oh, and they didn't stop. Like, Laura Bailey is great as Black Widow, and she has a great mission, by the way, when you find out what she's up to. And then for even Kate Bishop, they got Ashley Birch, and she's fantastic as Kate Bishop. She's like the perfect person to voice
Ashley
that
Birch is awesome.
character.
She's a great.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So much snark.
Agreed. All right. Well, these three are grouped pretty closely together in my personal list. I think that's why I'm not necessarily feeling the need to like really push. Mm-hmm. What's not in my top lists are things like Spider-Man, because I haven't played it, but I'm okay with it being in the top 5. I just would have trouble pushing it too high. Cyberpunk 2077, to me, the strength of that game isn't necessarily the storyline. I'm sorry if you loved it.
I'm with you on that.
But I think the characters are really good. But do I think it's top 5? For me personally, it wasn't. For me, it was at the bottom of my story list. So it was top 10. But it was at the very bottom of that top 10. So if someone wants to make the case for Cyberpunk staying real high, we can. Otherwise, I'm okay moving it down.
I don't know how high is real high, but I thought it was one of the better stories that I've experienced in a long time in gaming. I thought, I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed the entire ride of it. And I think story has a lot to do with world building as well. And a lot of people aren't familiar with the world of Cyberpunk unless you played like the pen and paper game. So their ability to show you a living, breathing world, maybe not in the like mechanically because it was kind of a broken mess for a lot of people, but like in terms of just selling you on a world that's existing, you know, and with ads and sexuality being like turned into profits and stuff like that, and like all the stuff that's going on. Like that's a major deal, and I think we have to give a little bit of accolades to like the depth and the scope of the actual world building and stuff like that. But I don't know, the story itself,
the overall storyline of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and then who, of course, gets into your head. Mm-hmm. I found that to be good, but it didn't blow my mind.
How far have you gotten into it, Tim? I'm
almost to the end.
Okay.
So I think it's very good. But what caught my attention are the smaller moments, and Kyle, you kind of highlighted some of them. Like there's a few moments where you're trying to continue the main story, but you're stuck talking to these characters they call dolls, which are basically these human robot combos that are just there for your sexual pleasure, and you pay a certain amount. They have to do and act like you want, but then when that mode is turned off, they're so sad and beaten down, and they're. Sorry, this is a very personal issue for me too. It's part of what I do for my work. I get real riled up at the idea of exploiting people against their will without truly getting their consent. I've got a big issue with the way the porn industry is run. So that's me personally. So I see all this stuff, and now I'm in a game. They're actually, despite the fact that yes, it's very sexual and it's not a good game for kids to play.
No.
But if you actually play the missions and listen to what they're saying and you pull back the layers, they're really exposing a lot of the problems that
There's
exist.
some nuances going on for sure.
They're just telling it in a way that's in this fantastic. So I actually really appreciated some of those moments where it was like a real broken human being that was trapped.
Well,
So
there's
I
that
found
one. There's that one specific one when you're lying in the bed and you're just kind of like laying like this and you're looking into her eyes. Like that specific one. Yes.
Yeah. That's a major one. There's a few other moments that kind of highlight some of that. That's you could still make an argument that it's kind of glorifying a lot of it. But anyway, I found that to be incredibly impactful. So to me, it's been some of the smaller moments, as well as the idea of improving yourself, extending your life.
I think
yeah, I found that to be a lot of it to be very interesting. But overall story, maybe the way it ends will really change my mind. But to me, it's kind of right around that 5-6 range overall. Despite
it's also interesting because the game kind of like any of these like games where you can either be a good guy or a bad guy type of approach. Like the progression with Johnny Silverhand, like that whole thing for me really resonated.
I thought it paid off big time, man.
Yeah, not just because I think Keanu Reeves is super cool, but,
but he is.
Because he is. But I just thought like kind of where your relationship with him starts. And then there's that one scene where you go to a certain location to find something, and then you get there, and it's just like, oh, there's just trash and stuff over it. And
it's my least favorite part of the game. I'm sorry.
I love
guys.
that part of the game.
Yes, because it's so rushed. One moment he's taking over. This is gonna get spoilery. I don't even know.
But
see, I'm with you there, Jeff. Because
you might have. So maybe you missed certain events.
No, I didn't miss it at all. Because I went from one mission to where he's being like abusive to me. Yes. And then the very next mission, he wants me to pity him, and I thought that was just poor writing.
And that's not how my game unfolded at all.
Yeah,
there's too many jumps there with the interaction with Johnny Silverhand throughout the game. In my experience, there were too many jumps, and I wondered, like, oh, do they have a defined order that I should have done these in?
That's what I think it is. I think we just did missions out of order, and
then we have to give this the same criticism we gave to Assassin's Creed, because Assassin's Creed core storyline is quite strong and a well-told story, but they've chosen to deliver it in a way that is not the strongest. And if that's what they do with Cyberpunk, where it's like, if you go out of order, hopefully it'll make sense to you in the end, but the NPCs and the characters aren't going along with the order that I picked.
By the time I was doing these missions, I had nothing left on the map. I had already finished everything else.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you did it in the same.
The only moment that what you're saying, where it kind of just seemed like he's acting one way and then another way, was actually the very beginning when you first interact with them. Like there was a shift there that I was like, oh, that seems kind of sudden.
No, I'm referring to there's a part where you have to go talk to Rogue, and he pretty much abuses you, and
I mean,
there's no consent there.
He is a dick, though. Bottom line, like
I thought that was very in line with his character.
But then the very next mission for me was that mission of please pity me, and I was still very bitter about the way he treated me.
Jeff was not feeling it.
Well,
nope.
Yeah,
I love that moment.
It is tricky because you can enter, like in this game, there's just all these different options, and I mean, again, Johnny Silverhand does have a certain personality, so even like him being nice is still not really like being like legitimately full on nice, but like
that's
like
fair.
his level of nice, but like it's just. I don't know. I guess it depends on what options you pick, how he responds, because there are certain moments where there's like 4 different things that you can choose, and
and I enjoyed the juxtaposition of him being kind of like this like really full of himself, selfish asshole, and then all of a sudden he realizes that he's we can't go into spoilers, but yeah, like it's just it's one of those moments where it's like maybe like no one really remembers you the way that you remember you, Johnny, and like that moment comes crashing down on him.
Yeah,
and it's a chink in the armor of someone who was unfazable, and now he's very very phased, and I don't know. It was super powerful to me personally.
He had kind of like the god complex, right? And then
he
absolutely. Realized,
especially realizing that he's alive past beyond his death. He's almost like even more cocky. He's like he's so cocksure of himself and everything. And I don't know. I think that moment where he exposes his like, wow, like I am just a forgotten thing, and like no one really remembers me, and what I did didn't do anything. It didn't change anything. Things just got worse. Like I don't know. It was a real moment for me. I really enjoyed it.
I think the moments really do resonate.
He's cocky, he's cocksure. I don't know if I like all these references you're throwing in, but
a lot of moments do really resonate. But like if they're out of order in any way, it can be disorienting. So I can see that.
Yeah, Yeah,
and that's actually consistent with Cyberpunk. There's a lot of penises in that game.
That's true. Penises and dildos.
Yeah.
Cyber penis.
Penises
There's
and
so many
dildos.
Okay,
penises,
so
like the
here's the thing.
glitches try and show
This
more
game to
penises.
me-
Like,
2077 is actually the number of wieners you see in the first 5 minutes.
it is, yeah.
Fun fact.
This game to me, it based on what you guys are saying and the passion you have for it, but also, in my opinion, the incredible strength of the characters and the performances and the world building. I'm with you, Kyle. The world building is fantastic.
That's part of the story. I think we got to talk about that.
I'm right there with it being in our top 5. I'll let you guys decide if it goes above or below Spider-Man. For me personally, I'd put it below Ori, so it'd be down like in the bottom half of our list. But I'm okay with it staying in the top 5. But you guys have to decide: is it going above Spider-Man?
I gotta be honest with you guys too. When I found out that the story was Johnny's in your head, I was like, oh, that's it. All right. I never was for whatever reason 100% on board with that. I went along with it. The gameplay's fun. I was hooked to the game, obviously, because I beat it. Like I had to, like right away. I was like in it. But I was just never into that.
Yeah, throw a story warning in the beginning.
Where you jack into the internet and like go to like all these crazy places and talk to rogues. There's way too much cool cyberpunk sci-fi stuff going on in this game to make me feel like that this is like even questionable that we're not putting it in the top 5.
Yeah,
I would put Spider-Man above it personally, though.
Yeah, I think y'all should talk about that. I think you and Jeff, who've played the game,
before we get to Spider-Man, even. I don't want to assume this goes high because it's actually not the highest on my list, and that's Ghost of Tsushima. Now, that's
not the highest on. Wow.
Yeah.
As far as story goes, no.
Yeah.
No.
The story's great, dude.
The story is very good. Listen, the story for Haven is great, and that's number 10. So, but the story of Ghost of Tsushima is, I think, quite good. It would have made a great epic movie as well. I think it's really great. But to me, if it goes below stuff like Ori, let me look on my personal list. I've got it. It's kind of vying for a spot, honestly, with Marvel's Avengers. I loved that story.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I thought you liked Marvel's Avengers.
Ghost of Tsushima is like one of the best like revenge tales like told in games.
It's hard. It's hard to like when you're trying to say something when you're trying to look at something like Ghost of Tsushima, right? Because you're trying to like think of the moments of like the really impactful moments, but then it's like it's an open world game, so there's like all of this like sort of emptiness or fluff in between.
Assassin's Creed.
You could say the same thing about Cyberpunk too. So
but again, Assassin's Creed, Tim, is literally 100 hours. You literally have to play basically 100 hours.
Which I did, and I loved it. And I played 70 hours almost of Ghost of Tsushima and loved that too. So I love both these stories. I have Ghost higher than Assassin's Creed on story. That's not even close. Like I think the story of Ghost is stronger than that. I think it's stronger than I think it's stronger than Haven. I do. That one I've got pretty high. I think it's stronger than Cyberpunk. Personally, I put Ghosts ahead of Cyberpunk, but you guys really want to fight for Cyberpunk. So that's where I start to wonder, like, okay, I would have it higher, but I have it behind Final Fantasy, Last of Us. I've got it behind Ori, which is pretty low on the list. That's kind of, I'm trying to balance out where it is on my list, what I would personally think, and then hearing what you guys are saying about, like, Cyberpunk for me would be like at number 8 or 9 on this one.
Oof.
If it's not top 2, I would. I'm gonna just hang up.
If Ghost is in top 2,
yeah.
I mean, should we just like pull the Band-Aid off and just discuss what the first one is and then go down from there? Like,
does anyone think there's a better story in video games than Last of Us Part 2 this year?
Yes.
I haven't even beaten the game yet.
Yeah,
I
okay.
can say that it's definitely like one of the easily one of the strongest stories of the year. 100%.
I wanted to find out. I'm glad I didn't make that assumption because for me, there's not a story that can compete with it in video games. Like if I'm thinking of a fully fleshed out story, the way it's written, the pacing, the characters, I think it's second to none, probably this generation, but definitely this year. I think it's an amazing feat in storytelling in video games. I've never seen a video game do what this one does. That being said, I don't want to assume that you all feel the same way. Some people hated the story. I mean, it got review bombed because people were so upset by the story.
Yeah,
by the way,
really happy.
I don't know how justified that is.
That confirms to me that
it's
the
not.
story was good, by the way.
I will say that like maybe the themes aren't as deep as I wanted them to be. Like in Last, but like revenge is bad and violence is awful. Like yeah, I know. Like I'm I know that the themes, and I'm way oversimplifying it.
Like the themes hit you like a ton of for me. The themes hit me like a ton of bricks. Just like in the last like mission.
Yeah.
Sure, and I'm talking about
it's full circle in that last mission, dude. Like it's crazy how much that hit.
Kyle, have you gotten
hard.
to the main midpoint kind of where things change?
No.
Okay. So I won't say too much about it, but I will say what they do about halfway through the game to turn the entire story on its head and let you see things from a new perspective are, I thought, brilliant.
Oh,
because
if you're talking about, we can't talk about it. Yes, I know what you're talking about, and yes, I have gotten to that.
Okay, all right. And I knew you knew about it too, because you said someone spoiled some things for you.
Yeah, that got spoiled for me. When I got to it, it was not any less. That's the thing about, and that's why I want to champion this game. The thing that was spoiled for me, whenever I got to it, I was still like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
and the way they got there, oh my god, the line she says right before, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly. There are this game took me on an emotional roller coaster ride, and I mean like not just that made me feel sad. When I think of stories and I think of emotion, it's just like did it get me choked up? Like was it like the end of Armageddon when Bruce Willis is saying goodbye? Is it like that? This isn't that.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I just throw out there that if
go ahead.
The what is there, 4 of us here, if we're fine literally just discussing a specific moment as long as we've all experienced that, this is the game of the year. Like if we want to fully talk about why a game is better than another game, shouldn't we kind of just be able to say it? And if people don't want to hear it,
I'll still talk about it in generalities, but I will get a little more specific. I won't necessarily name character names, but there's of course a pretty impactful death towards the beginning, and it's brutal and it's rough, and not only did I'll be honest, I welled up. I was getting
for sure.
But not only that, I was mad. Like I was
for sure.
angry, and I could not wait to get control back of the main character.
It was so intentional.
I wanted to kill everyone. And so in a game
I think that's what a lot of people hated too, was this specific death you're talking about. And it's like, you guys missed the entire point of why they did that. Like,
or they got it.
Feels like they missed the first game too. Because
that's the thing.
Because there were things that happened in the first game, and I'm only avoiding spoilers because it'll ties directly into what happens in the second game. But there are things that happen where it's like there's people that we're putting on a pedestal that don't deserve to be put there. They're just not good people.
Joel,
we can go ahead and say it for
the first what we were talking about, but Joel's a gigantic piece of shit all through the entire first game. He screws over so many people. Yeah, and like if you think we live in a world where like no one's gonna forgive that, like that, it's silly.
Well, here's the thing: Joel does that, but he's thrust into the spotlight. He doesn't want to be. He's put in a position to make decisions that I can't say that I would make that many different decisions. Honestly, it's hard. It's really tough. And so that's what I love about that is it's complex. He's a complex character who makes decisions that, in retrospect, you go, "Boy, that was pretty rough, man. You really gave up a lot of lives in order to save one, or to make yourself not feel sad, or whatever the thing was." And I remember when you and I and Derek replayed this for our kind of book club discussion, we discussed how like I could see how Joel could easily, if you see the story from another angle, he's actually a villain. But since we're playing as him, he's the hero.
Right.
That's what Last of Us Part 2 does. They allow you to see. Remember how you thought, I wonder if he's kind of a villain because he's not really the best? Last of Us Part 2 lets you see that side of his character in some ways that are really interesting, really intriguing. Do they do it perfectly? I don't know. Maybe not. I could not have even gotten close to telling a story as I thought intricate and intriguing and compelling as this one. And by the way, I really meant that. I got angry, and I don't usually get angry at a video game story. I get angry in a video game as multiplayer and I'm getting destroyed. I get angry.
It's different. It's different.
I don't usually get angry at the story at all. Even in Ghost of Tsushima, there were a few emotional moments, but not once, despite some pretty bad things happening. I was never mad. It was more like, that's kind of a bummer.
No, me neither. It was just there was more poetry in Tsushima.
It was very poetic, absolutely, but there's even some major character deaths. And some of those characters aren't even human. That part was sad, and it's just still like, okay, that was a bummer, but I moved on and I kept exploring the world. Last of Us Part 2 made me feel things that I don't feel during a video game ever. Well, I feel this way. Breaking Bad.
To be fair, too, a lot of that emotion carries over from the first part too.
It has to. It has to.
Yeah,
it's a sequel,
so
it has to.
I mean, that's what makes it such a good sequel.
But here's the thing:
like it builds off of that foundation.
When you get to the end of the, I don't know how you want to break this down into acts, but you get to they really flip everything on its head, new perspective in the middle of the game. At the end of that segment, there's another main conflict, or I guess you call it a boss battle. I was truly conflicted and upset. I didn't want this battle to happen. Like, that's honestly how I felt. I didn't want this battle to happen.
Right.
So, and I was truly and I was talking to Derek and Dan about this. We did a spoiler cast on it, and I think Dan, it might have been you, it might have been Derek, was like, "Well, yeah, that wasn't even close for me. I still wanted so and so," and I was like, I truly couldn't decide. Like, I was torn between what I wanted to happen, who I wanted to be victorious. Because there was no right and wrong, and that's why I think this is such a brilliant story. Is it's got so many layers of gray that when it was over, all I could do was think about it. I couldn't stop thinking about this.
People like to just because like the people that got angry at this game, right? It's like, so when you think of it, kind of like in our civilized society, when somebody does something bad, it's like, well, if you're a normal person, you're like, well, F that person, right? They're a terrible person. They did something bad. You can't look through that lens at this game in this world. Everybody in this world is pretty much terrible. There's just different layers of terrible, right?
Mm-hmm. What level are you willing to sink to survive, or
the only ones who aren't terrible have died already.
Yeah, so. It's either morally gray or bad. There isn't really even a good person.
No, yeah, that's true.
So it's like because it's like this, fictional world where everything's just been decimated and destroyed, and people are just trying to survive, and survival of the fittest. Like, if I need to take you out because you have things that I need, and I have a family that we're out here in the apocalypse, like, I'm gonna take your stuff, and if I have to kill you, I'll do it.
And they use some pretty powerful and pretty traditional, kind of tried and true storytelling methods to create sympathy, or at least empathy, for a character that you hate early on, and then they connect that person.
Can I be honest with you? I thought the way that they wrote a certain person that is in the second half of the game, most of it, I ended up being like, I think I like the way that they wrote her better.
That's where I kind of landed.
Yeah, I was like,
kind of.
Yeah, I was kind of like, at first I was like, I don't know about this, but and then, like, by the end of it, I was like, we're getting a lot from this perspective. Like, we're getting way more.
And again, I think that feeds into like real life, into like the real world. Oh, well, so that person's basically moved on, right? And they're actually changing. They're trying to become better.
They're atoning. I think they're atoning, right? Because they threw. There's kind of like this. Man, it's so hard to dance around spoilers.
I'm sorry.
So here's the thing. I'll say this. There's two main characters in Last of Us Part 2, just like in Last of Us Part 1. It just may not be the characters you expect. So in Last of Us Part 2, there's two real central characters, and they both experience traumatic and just terrible loss. Mm-hmm. And you could make an argument over which loss is worse, honestly. I feel like the person in the second half of the game actually had, when you think of the body count, I feel like that was almost a worse loss, if I'm being honest. Even as mad as I was early in the game, when I watched what the second character had to go through the second half of the game, things that I caused.
Dude, seriously, think of everything that happened in the first half of the game.
And then I watched that, and I'm just like,
and everything you did.
They are both suffering, and one character chooses, in my opinion, in this world like Daniel just described, they choose a morally more admirable response to all of it. Maybe just barely. But by the very end, when a choice has to be made, it's like, fine, I'm going to walk away. The other character struggles with that, and of course that's why the final missions come in, because that person struggles with that. So
because that person's dealing with revenge. Like, their main sort of thrust through the story is revenge, whereas the other person experiences that, goes through it, and then they kind of like start evolving. They meet a couple of individuals, and they start kind of growing and learning, because now they're interacting with this person, and they're getting like these different perspectives and views of the world that they weren't getting before. So then it's like, oh, well, that person's actually grown more, but you still have that connection to the first game. So like, you have the people that are still in the camp of like, no, but I'm still like on team that person versus the new person. You know what I mean? Because it's like, the bottom line is, you're either okay with what Joel did in the first game at all, or you're not, right? You're always going to be like, well, he murdered a bunch of people because you're playing a video game and you're killing people,
right?
And he did it for specific reasons, and you're in support of that, or you're not, based off of then what happens in the second game and sort of the events that unfold there. So
and the way the first game ends, which was really powerful.
Yeah,
and that was very controversial and very like, oh no, I don't know how to feel about this. And the second game takes all those emotions
and multiplies them by 10.
There's
going to be consequences for that.
Absolutely.
the entire first game. I mean,
Absolutely.
you had to. I mean, if people are delusional, if they just thought the second game was just going to be like, yeah, it's a new mission, and just
more
gotta go get a
adventures
vaccine.
Joel and Ellie.
Yeah,
transport a vaccine
it's
around.
A good old buddy cop comedy.
By the way,
all about
some of the storytelling devices they use with flashbacks, I think, is quite powerful as well. I think they do a really good job with that to fill in the blank.
I was actually going to bring up. There's one flashback that happens in a museum.
Yes,
that was like one of my favorite scenes in any game ever.
Yep, it's fantastic.
Kyle, did you get to that part?
I don't know. Is that before the?
It's before the change, I think.
Museum.
Yeah,
part.
it's
in like a dinosaur museum.
It's a flashback when it's Ellie's birthday and Joel has some surprises for her. It's just so sweet and really endearing. And there's a part where they get in a spaceship thing with headphones. It's just so good.
Yeah, the way they did that audio. The audio mixing and stuff. If we had a category for that, I feel like Last of Us would take that because holy crap, that was amazing.
So everything we're saying, I'm not hearing any reason not to have this one in the top. To me, the top game, but we could put it top 2 since we haven't really discussed Final Fantasy yet. But as far as the other ones go, before we get into Final Fantasy, I think it's fair to move Last of Us Part 2 up. Yeah. We haven't talked Final Fantasy yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I haven't even said about Last of Us, primarily to avoid divulging spoilers. But yeah, there's some things thematically that happen in the last mission, or I guess you could say the epilogue or whatever of the story.
Yeah.
That like really hammer home the themes and stuff and what the game's trying to say.
Yeah.
That really it just tore me apart, dude. I was a freaking mess after the game ended.
Jeff's just sobbing like, I can't see the screen.
You should have sent pictures to Derek.
So the bottom 5 that we have right now, and number 10 is Haven, and then Tell Me Why, Ori at number 8, Yakuza at number 7, Marvel's Avengers at number 6. Above that, we've got a collection of 5 games, not in no particular order yet, and that's Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII, Cyberpunk, and Spider-Man.
Cyberman.
Cyberman Miles 2077.
I already expressed my opinion about Cyberpunk. By the way, none of these games have bad stories. Nothing on the top 10, or even some of the other ones that didn't make the top 10, have bad stories. It's more a matter of just trying to rank them based on what's been said about them.
Right. Yeah, it's all about preference. Yeah.
I've experienced most of Cyberpunk 2077. That might not be fair to say because I didn't do all the side stuff. But I've experienced enough to, I think, give a valid take on it. I think this one belongs at the bottom of this group of 5 if it has to be in the top 5. But if you guys really want to keep it above any of these other ones, speak now.
I mean, y'all should really speak to Spider-Man. There's no way Cyberpunk's going over Final Fantasy, Ghost of Tsushima, and Last of Us in terms of story for me personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm the champion of Cyberpunk. It seems like. So
yeah.
I'm ready to concede it being at 5, despite like.
What about Cyberpunk versus Spider-Man then? Jeff and Dan, you got to decide.
Spider-Man.
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, I think Miles does go a bit ahead of Cyberpunk. So.
Okay. So Cyberpunk's going to slide down to 5th place, and right now at least
there's some real emotion, and you could argue that it's rushed because it was already going to be a smaller package type game, a Lost Legacy type game. So you could argue some aspects of the certain story beats are rushed, because we got to fill that time limit. But even so, I still experienced some emotions at the end of the game. I just feel they wrote the characters so freaking well.
That's because you were still crying from Last of Us Part 2.
It was Last of Us Part 2, man. I was just
I was
just thinking of the very ending shots of Last of Us Part 2, and
I think there were enough like points of the game, like story-wise, where they kind of showed enough of Miles, like actually what his personality is, and him kind of fighting, being a Spider-Man, right? Because they kept kind of calling him the other Spider-Man. And by the end of it, it's like, no, he's a Spider-Man. There's more than one. He's not the other. He's just a Spider-Man.
So if we're looking at these top 4, Last of Us, Ghost, Final Fantasy, and Spider-Man, are there any that Jeff and Dan you would push for Spider-Man to move ahead of on this list?
No.
I mean, I could bounce back and forth between Ghost and Spider-Man, but I love them both probably about equally for different reasons. So,
Jeff, what about you on those two, Ghost and Spider-Man?
The ones that I'm most conflicted about is honestly it's Ghost and Last of Us. Like those two.
Okay.
You could swap. So you've got Ghost.
That answers my question. So Spider-Man.
But yeah, Final Fantasy. Like I might be more of a comic book Marvel guy and stuff. So I might another day put Miles ahead of Final Fantasy VII, but I don't know. It just feels illogical. It just doesn't feel like it doesn't sit right in my
Dan's
brain.
got a lot to say about Fantasy VII.
Oh, actually, we're out of time. Sorry, Dan. Yeah.
And we got to go to a break. And we're out of time.
I'll just tell you what. How about the three of us just give our quick? Let's try to keep it to a minute or so, and then we'll let Dan make a case for Final Fantasy VII. To me, it's my second favorite story of the year, right behind Last of Us Part 2. I think Final Fantasy VII has a tremendous story. I think they retell a classic story in a way that I did not expect, and that is they surprised me. They did the whole, like, it's very marketing, because I do a lot of marketing in my position. I have for the last 10 years or so. If it's all about surprising and delighting. If you can successfully surprise and delight your audience, then you're doing your job. And they do that, in my opinion. Square did that from start to finish in this game. Sorry about the loud vehicle.
Speeding away from that bad opinion. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, wow.
I'm kidding. It's
and that's
not.
I'm from someone who might.
I'm just being a troll.
My expectations for this game were high because I was ready to re-experience the same story with great visuals. That's what I thought, and I kind of thought new battle techniques and stuff. But here we go, same story. But I'm excited. They just completely surprised me, and I was hooked from the start to finish. I love the idea of this also maybe even being alternate reality. I don't know, but all I know is this. I loved it. It's my second favorite story of the year. Jeff, what about you?
Oh yeah, actually, the order that we have it in is probably where I would put it.
Okay. But you do have it pretty high. I mean, if you have it third,
dude, it's super high. It really impressed me because I went in. I wasn't even gonna buy the freaking game, and then release weekend, I was just getting serious FOMO and I bought it. And then I ended up on your podcast, even though I was a total noob to the series.
That's fear of missing out. People who don't.
Yes, if you don't know what FOMO is, fear of missing out. So the story really floored me. I mean, especially because I was going in not having any groundwork at all for any of these characters. And the game just made me invest super quick. And I know that there's certain character quirks that might not hit. I mean, because I don't play a lot of is this considered a JRPG?
Yeah. 100%.
So I don't really play a lot of those type of games. I mean, I am now. I'm playing a lot of them. But like this one, sometimes there's quirks and stuff where like Cloud sometimes doesn't act like a real person. But that's just like a JRPG protagonist thing.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to accept this is like a cultural, just a different way of writing a character or a protagonist.
I mean, it's not that different from something like a Yakuza where you have to understand how they're telling a story. So when a character all of a sudden something's said and there's a weird delay and then you go, huh? Or huh? Like they would there's a lot of that
or they're super animated, but
And that's not
so I think
common.
this is. I think Final Fantasy VII probably prepared me best for Yakuza in how I received that story too. This is just the way some of these stories are written. Right, but once I adjusted to that, I was like, dude, this story is freaking brilliant. We mentioned world building in Cyberpunk. I mean, there's a lot in here too. I mean, obviously they're carrying it over from what I've heard and read. They're carrying a lot of that over from the way it was originally done, but there's so much more. I mean, obviously, because of the gen that it was released in, much more detail added to it.
All right, so I played the old one a lot, several times through, loved it, couldn't wait for this, and this one delivered in ways I didn't expect. Jeff didn't play any of the old ones, played it, didn't really know what to expect, loved it. Kyle, what about you? Was this game pretty high on when you think of best story, or are you not as high on this one as us?
It's extremely high for me. I think this game is awesome. I think when Dan launched it into his eloquent tirade, I'm probably just going to be sitting here nodding heavily, yes,
he'll be eloquent.
Yes, I think this story is brilliant. I think, and I don't know how much we're going into spoilers, so I'll kind of dance around it. I think that the things that they implicate or that they lean into or that they suggest and the bigger cascading effects that's going to have on the rest of the story are huge. And I don't think any of us realize how, even the people who are in on the maybe different, reality, maybe different retelling, maybe different timeline, whatever, however you want to word it. Even people who are subscribing to that theory, I don't even think we understand how much is going to be different and what the effects are of this game and how it told this part of the story.
Yeah,
and how that's going to change everything going forward.
And by the way, if it never ends up being explicitly shared with us that this is an alternate whatever, I'm also okay with this just being a different version of a story that I knew before. Like it's not that different for me. I'm okay with that. If that ends up being it, I know some people will be disappointed, but if they never explicitly say, here's what this is and here's how it like I'm okay with that, with this just being a new experience of that thing. Kyle, for you, is this better than Ghost of Tsushima?
I would really probably cheer for Ghost of Tsushima in terms of just it's just a straight revenge tale. There's no frills to it really. Like it's as basic as a revenge tale can be. It's just the way that it's told and executed on is so perfect. And I think the acting is really good. And I think there's many moments in it that are just like excellent. But I think what Final Fantasy VII pulled off in terms of what it was expected of it, and I'm talking about just story, and I guess you can implicate this to like the entire experience as a whole. But like it over-delivered somehow. Like even the story did, specifically the story even, because we're also talking about it like 8 months, 9 months, 10 months later, and talking about maybe different timeline. We sound like the Ancient Aliens guy right now, you know? Like there's different timelines and crazy
like
hair.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Screaming about black helicopters in the sky. But seriously, I just like we're still talking about it all this time later, you know. And like I feel like for me, especially after having this conversation, and probably especially after what Dan's gonna say, like I think Final Fantasy's got to go over Ghost of Tsushima, even though if you ask me on any other day, Ghost of Tsushima might be my number one, just because of the way it told its story. But
all right, Dan, make the case for Final Fantasy, and where would you rank it out of these three?
I mean, samurais are obviously awesome, so that is tough.
It's already plural.
Yeah,
gotcha.
All right.
Gotcha.
I don't know if this will be eloquent, Kyle, but I appreciate the confidence, vote of confidence. But I mean, yeah, for me, it actually is tough because it actually is super close between Last of Us and 7 Remake, but 7 Remake does edge out Last of Us for me personally.
Shocker.
Surprise, mother.
So on brand of you.
So yeah, like kind of like how we were saying it. So Jeff is new to the series. I'm not new to the series. Kyle isn't new to the series. Tim isn't new to the series. But so this game really worked on a couple of different fronts, was nostalgia and newcomers. Mm-hmm. It worked for Jeff, even though he has you haven't played the original, right, Jeff?
No.
Okay. So it worked for Jeff. He thought there were parts about that game that he really enjoyed, and he literally has no background of the original game. So he has no like that moment was in the original and they fleshed it out, or this moment's completely new. Like for example, chapter 4, that entire chapter was not in the original game whatsoever. Yeah. That's the one when you're on the bikes in the tunnel and then you get to that like
oh wow.
Yeah, like that whole section.
Roche character is brand new.
Yeah, Roach. Which, by the way, Ignition that's Flame, the song that's playing when you're fighting him, amazing.
Yeah, yes, super great.
Yeah,
best score.
So like, best score. So like, it works on that front for people who haven't experienced the game. They jump in, they're like, oh, this is super cool, even if it's anime bullshit. Like, it's just super cool. I really like it. The characters are awesome. And then it works for, us veterans because we've played the original, some of us maybe more than others, but
well, Dan, what about characters like Jesse and the other two guys? I'm blanking on the names. I'm sorry.
Wedge and Biggs.
Wedge and Biggs.
Yes, thank you.
How dare you?
Talk a little bit about how characters like that were expounded on, because they were just such minor, let's just get the game started characters in the original one. And how did you feel about the way they built those out? Because I thought when I first started it, honestly, I thought, oh, they're just going to pad this thing out.
Right.
They're just going to add extra padding, lots of extra bonus stuff to find, whatever. But they actually built in true characters with depth that I cared about. I was shocked at that.
I loved everybody in Avalanche.
It really all just freaking blends into this potential possibility of this game not really being a remake. I'm not going to say I'm going to try to not say very specific things, but I will be a bit spoilery. So anybody who wants to skip ahead, just skip ahead. But like, yeah, with the whole this being an alternate timeline or essentially this timeline sort of overriding the original timeline. Cause essentially like Sephiroth, some stuff with Sephiroth, and I'll get to that later, but they're clearly expanding on, like with example, Jesse, Wedge and Biggs, they expanded on them because they're going to potentially show up in the other games, because in the original one, all three of them died in that one sequence.
Yeah.
And then in this one, there's some stuff where it's like, well, hold on, this is a little different. Yep. We don't really know for sure, but it seems like, maybe that's not totally the case. And then there's theories of like, potentially them popping up in certain other locations because, for example, Jessie mentions like with her mom and her dad, well, her dad's in a coma, but telling her mom that she works at the Golden Saucer and she's an actress there or part-time actress or whatever. So then there's like this theory that when we get to that part in the remakes that she's actually going to be there potentially, but like things are going to be a little different for various reasons that happen.
So is the hope, by the way, you just remind, I forgot that those three characters all died in the first one.
Yeah.
I forgot that, but I just remember that they fell out of the story, but I guess that's why they're dead.
Right.
In the original version. So does that provide hope that other character deaths later in the original game are now going to be adjusted or changed or avoided?
Yes,
of course,
I think so.
Of course, that's potentially what people are thinking, but like,
come on.
It depends on what camp you fall in, right? Because it's either that moment has to happen for various reasons, or all of these changes are occurring to prevent that from happening. But then there's also this potential of like, well, let's say that death doesn't happen, right? Then people are wondering, well, are they gonna like in the last game have it where there's a good ending and a bad ending? Like maybe because that person didn't die, then it actually makes it so you don't get to do this one particular thing, and then the actual world does get destroyed. So then you get the bad ending. Like does that thing have to happen? You know what I mean?
Like the decision at the end of that first Don't Nod game. I'm always blanking out on the name of it for whatever reason.
Life is Strange?
Yeah, where you have to make that choice at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Similar to that.
Here's the thing. I think that's just such an iconic moment. It is. I know we're speculating. This is all speculation now. There's just such an iconic moment in the Final Fantasy series and Final Fantasy VII, that major character death, not only visually but also storytelling wise. It just hits home in the right ways and allows the story to progress and the conclusion. Important. So I think it's incredibly important. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But putting aside speculation of the future,
sure.
What in your mind gives this the edge over Last of Us? And is that more of like a, hey, just for me personally, I can't put anything above this because it's too meaningful to me? Or do you truly think that objectively the story, the progression of characters and the storyline being told is truly better than Last of Us and Ghost?
So for me with story, I like to sort of have there be like a mystery that is pushing me along, and then if you're going to have like sequels, then there's some things get resolved, right? But like then it ends and it's like, oh, there's a really cool mystery and there's going to be a sequel, so then I get to experience that and that carries over, so that's cool because then I get to kind of still be with these characters and experience these new things. That's what's going on here, because they're literally taking an original game that was one game on 3 discs and expanding it into multiple parts. We don't know how many parts yet, but I like the mystery and the intrigue that they're doing here, because again, they're retelling a story and potentially it's actually a sequel because of various things that they're maybe trying to do. And also really like Kyle said, we're still talking about the game because it's just so much fun. The mystery of it, like, is this actually a sequel, or are they just messing with our heads and it's not, and they're just retelling a story and they're just doing these interesting story things where they're kind of being like, well, did we just add stuff, or are we changing it? What are we doing? We're messing with your head. Does remake actually mean we remade the original, or is Sephiroth remaking the timeline? What's going on?
And to me, at some points, it feels like 2 characters in this game kind of knows what's going on and are very omnipresent. Maybe this has happened before and that everyone's been here before, and maybe I'm putting too much of my own theory into it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think that there's some key moments where I'm just like, and that's the stuff that I linger on to, like all these months later. It's like, man, they took a 20-year-old game and told us a 5-hour version of that story, stretched across 40 hours, added so much more to it, and it's the thing I'm still thinking about 90 months later, and it's only a portion of the story,
Obviously, Last of Us Part 2 is masterful, and again, like I said, it is legitimately super close between the 2 games, but like.
And that's saying a lot if you guys know how much Dan loves Final Fantasy. That's saying a lot.
But I love the first Last of Us. It's one of my favorite. It's like a top 3, top 5 game of all time.
Right, gotcha.
But like, I'll be very honest. I'm not saying this just to be like, oh, I'm so smart. Being very honest, I definitely was anticipating that particular moment in the beginning of the game that we were trying to avoid spoiling earlier.
Yeah,
I
same.
anticipated that happening.
So at some point in the game, I did too.
I just it just definitely seemed like something that had to happen.
Well, yeah,
So,
I mean, I felt like the game was kind of Walking Deading us.
Yes,
a little bit. I mean, because it is kind of the same environment that they're in, where people that you love don't live long.
Right.
So.
Remember when Walking Dead was a good show?
Oh. Yeah, remember that? Remember when you cared? Remember when you cared about that show?
Yeah.
Yes, while the story that they're telling in Last of Us is masterful, I mean, in my opinion, the way that they're telling the story in this remake and the things that they're changing, the things that they're adding, how they're expounding on these particular things that were there before, how Aerith seems more self-aware in this game, which then attributes to the whole potentially this being a sequel, because she seems to know things, and there's literal moments where she says like somebody's talking to her and she like stops for a second and she's thinking and she says something and like Tifa's like, what, Aerith, what is it that you're not telling us? And then like a moment kind of interrupts that conversation, so then Tifa forgets to kind of ask her again.
Never mind the ghost things that pop up every time the story changes,
which is like people were annoyed by that, and I kind of get it because it just looked like the Dementors from freaking Harry Potter, but like
and the Dementors,
the Dementors. Don't drop the soap. Don't drop the soap. But like they're there for a very specific reason, but they're also kind of symbolizing the fandom. If you think about it, the fandom wants these things to happen because that's what those ghosts are. The fates, they're there for a reason. They're trying to make the events that happen in the original happen in this one. That's literally what they're doing,
and that's kind of on a linear path,
Yeah. Which is what the fans wanted, or some fans wanted, right? Because they were like, "Oh, I just want a one-for-one remake, just the same
meta.
story."
It's number one. That's meta. It's number one.
Yeah, but like, so it's kind of being like, "Oh, it's almost like Square Enix mocking the fans that just wanted it to be a carbon copy." It's like, well, this is what you guys want, but like
it's like those things are the fans that are pushing them to go a certain direction, and they're fighting the whole time. That's really cool.
But the heroes are trying to break fate, which by the end of the game, then that sort of moment happens, and there's all the glowy stuff around Midgar because suddenly maybe they're not there anymore. So it's like, well, if nothing is guiding these heroes to continue doing the same beats, is the second part going to be?
Yeah, maybe part 2 is them breaking the fourth wall, and they keep looking at the camera like, "You're doing this."
Yeah, right.
I just
like keeps on pointing finger gun at you.
For me, games that have the best story, a game to me that has the best story has mystery, it has intrigue. I think the characters in the game have to be really interesting and well written.
Yeah.
And again, this was a non-voiced game originally, so now they added voices, which is like a really tough thing because it's like people are gonna have opinions. It's like, that voice.
You have the headcanon, like this person sounds like this in my head, and then like but everyone sounds great.
And that's a dangerous game, but they delivered
it's
on
such a dangerous game, and they killed it with everybody. Like I liked even like Jesse and everyone like that. Like everyone was just perfect.
People had low expectations because when they announced this at that E3 of Dreams, that E3 where they showed they showed
Shenmue 3,
and then they revealed
God of War.
Yeah.
No, it was
wasn't it God of War?
No, it was the Guardian.
No.
What is it? Guardian something?
The Last Guardians.
Last Guardian. When they like, hey, we're actually remaking this, and then some time passed, and it was like, oh, CyberConnect, the guys that do the Naruto games, are making it. It's like, all right, well, that's a little weird. They're just
that's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's so out of. Oh, it's so weird. That was such a weird choice for them.
Yeah, they were like, oh, okay, so they're not doing it themselves. That's hopefully this turns out okay. And then some time passed, and then it was like Square Enix is actually reverting all of the they're doing the game internally now. So then it's like, so now it's been like 4 or 5 years, and now they're starting over from scratch. Like when the hell it was like Final Fantasy 15 all over again, where it's like, how long is it going to be until we see this game? And then the game came out. And people had low expectations, and they just blew all of us away. Or at least the people that enjoyed it. Some people still didn't enjoy it, but I think legitimately they surprised us. They did a really good job. They added stuff to it that is meaningful for the future parts because again, they make.
Hopefully they make.
Yeah.
I know, yeah. I'm scared of that part. Yeah.
Okay, so let me try to. We're looking at these 3 games. I think we'll be looking at them again when we do our overall category in the future as well, which probably won't be this week. But I'm glad we're spending time on story. I'm enjoying this. I'm okay to delay the overall to the next week. That's fine.
I just want to say one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
I think probably most likely, I think it's pretty obvious Last of Us will win Game of the Year. So let's just give Final Fantasy Story of the Year. I mean, let's just at least give it the Story of the year.
So I do want to make
sure. It's not going to win Game of the Year. So like, just give me something, all right?
I do want to make sure that Ghost gets a little bit of love on story. Are you guys still there?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. I wasn't trying to insinuate that I don't like the story of Ghost.
No, you did insinuate it, and I'm offended.
No, I think you said I hated Ghost.
I did like it, but as much as I loved the world, visuals, and gameplay of Ghosts, I think those get the edge for me personally over Last of Us Part 2, just my personal preference, what I enjoy. Last of Us Part 2 gets the edge on story. Actually, it doesn't get the edge. I think it demolishes Ghost and story personally. But Ghost tells a really strong story of, the revenge story. It does a good job of it. And specifically the final showdown, which is, very personal and very moving, and you have a decision to make at the end. I found that to be quite impactful. The rest of the game, the rest of the story, I found to be good. Was it amazing? I didn't find it to be amazing. There were moments that I actually thought the gameplay and the story they're telling, the narrative they're telling, don't always mesh that well together. The thing, and now some of that could be, hey, we purposefully want you to feel bad about being stealthy. Okay, fair, that's fine. I just felt there was too many inconsistencies for me to say it's at the top. So I think Ghost lands pretty firmly in the 3rd position between these 3, because the other 2, I genuinely feel like if an award show, for example, picked either of those to win Best Story, I'd be happy, because I think Final Fantasy and Last of Us Stories are both top notch. I think Ghost of Tsushima is just in that tier just below them, personally.
Well, you're wrong.
Is anyone wanting to fight Ghost to be above those 2?
That's the thing, is I agree with your order, but nothing about what you said about Ghost. So, I don't agree with anything that you said, but I agree with your order.
The thing is, actually, I have become since the Dan rant. I've become. It's not really a rant though. He's just making good points. I have become more receptive to Ghost being number 3 because of. Also, Kyle mentioned the point of us still talking about it and theorizing off of the story from the remake. So I'm far more flexible with putting that.
The thing when you rank stuff, you can't just talk about how good something else is. You have to counterbalance it. Like everything we've talked about with Last of Us and the emotional impact and roller coaster and just stunning character and the shock value and the surprise and delight they do. The Final Fantasy VII remake, where they took you on a ride you did not expect, and they're blowing our minds with what they're doing with that story. This is not a bash on Ghost. It's not trying to do those 2 things, but it also didn't do those 2 things. It didn't take me.
The spectacle that these other 2 things have, and
this didn't take me on an emotional roller coaster. I thought it was awesome. I felt
weird.
Like a bash.
Okay,
I didn't have an emotional roller coaster with Ghost. I thought it was good.
I feel like I was on an emotional roller coaster, especially because you get so close to a lot of the side characters in that game, and it's like.
But you can avoid some of them too.
You can. That's true.
Because at the end of the game, there is even, I forget who it is. I forget her name when you speak to her. But she'd be like, oh, yeah, there's still that person that you haven't met up with. Why don't you go see how he or she is doing? So, like, there's even kind of like in the game, they'll be like, oh, you haven't done that yet. You should go do that. Mm-hmm. So, like, you might miss out on those moments, Similar
to some of the other games that didn't make it this high, it's got some really impactful story moments for sure.
Yeah.
But as an overall story, start to finish, looking at the entire arc, love the character of Jin. I mean, this is one of the best overall games, if not the best, with one of the best stories of the year. I just don't think it's close to the other 2. And that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just not. I don't think it's close to Final Fantasy or Last of Us. And we'll talk about it more with overall, too, because Ghost, I've talked about this before, it still is vying for first place of my favorite overall game because it's so freaking fun to play. And it looks amazing.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm just thinking about the narrative. It's not quite on par with the other 2, in my opinion. That being said, Dan, you really made a great case for Final Fantasy VII. I would have no issue if the 3 of you are all like hardcore and it must be number 1. I won't lose any sleep over it. I just think Last of Us Part 2 still takes the cake as best narrative of the year. It surprised me. It made me mad. It made me sad. It made me happy. It did everything in between.
Yeah.
And by the time it was all done, I just kind of leaned back. It's one of the few times that I didn't skip credits. I just kind of leaned back and watched the credits and just thought about it.
Oh, dude, yes. I was like, Kyle and I and our friend JD, we have like a trio chat that we just constantly hit up every day. And I was just in the chat like, I don't even know what to do with myself now.
Yeah.
Finish this game.
So
like, I don't know what life is like when I can't stop, when I can't think about this game anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like where it just leaves my brain, because it's just, I'm in a life now where I've experienced that story. It sounds super corny to say.
But it's the only game that gave me the same response story-wise, same response that I got after finishing a show like Breaking Bad, where I just leaned back and was like, what a ride.
Yeah, dude. That's it.
That is insane to me.
And then
now, when I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake,
like,
when I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, I was bummed because I know there's so much more, and I was like, oh, can't wait for the next one. So it wasn't that I sat there and thought, what a crazy story, and I started to question my life like Last of Us 2 made me do. But I still thought it was amazing. So all that to say, for me, we'll just start ranking these so we can wrap this one up. Last of Us Part 2, then Final Fantasy VII, then Ghost of Tsushima is how I would vote. And I'm okay with this kind of casting our votes for this.
I'm all right with that now.
I would actually vote. I would vote that way too, even though I think Final Fantasy VII is amazing. But like, I think that there's something to be said about like having a full story and an ending and everything like that. And I don't think that should be a dock against Final Fantasy VII, but it should be something we elevate Last of Us for. And despite not me getting to the end, I know that I know it sticks to landing because I've heard you guys talk about it, and I've heard the internet talk about it, and I just know that like it's one of those things that you just feel completed after watching or experiencing. Like I know the final. I don't have to argue for this game anymore. I just wanted to bring it up. I know the final like boss fight, I guess you could call it, in Last of Us 2 isn't necessarily like an amazing, because there's a 3/4 of the way through the game, there's a big boss fight, and it's awesome. Yeah. So the final one isn't that, but it is certainly one of the most cinematic final boss fights I've ever.
I didn't want to hit the button on that last one.
Yeah, it was, and there was
like
Sephiroth. No, Sephiroth.
Have you fought Sephiroth? Like,
I wanted to smash Sephiroth.
There was like no score. It was just the brutality of it was just the focus of it.
Yep. Exactly.
Man.
So Jeff. Where did you land on these three?
Oh yeah, the same thing with Last of Us being number 1, then Final Fantasy, and then Ghost, because you guys have swayed me.
Well, I guess
moving up,
Remake will not be winning first place in anything this year, you bastards.
Kyle, what did you say on this one?
The same as you and Jeff. I really like Final Fantasy VII Remake, but The Last of Us, just like there's something to be said about having an end.
It's really crazy because 2019 Final Fantasy would have finished first place in just about every respect, and that's despite me really liking stuff like Outer Worlds and the Fallen Order. I loved those games, but
Outer Wilds,
no.
I played Outer Wilds finally. Didn't love it.
Kyle, that's because it's a bad video game.
Yeah, I didn't know what was going on. I kept on flying out of the solar system so far, like nothing was populating anymore. Like, fuck that game, man.
So, I mean, this is basically our game of the year list, right?
So Dan, you're going. Which order do you have 2 and 3? You have Final Fantasy as number 1. What do you have as 2 and 3?
It would be 7 Remake and then Last of Us and Ghost, yeah. But I mean, I feel like this is just going to be our GOTY is going to basically probably be this. Yeah. I'm going to guess.
I told you guys in when I did the PlayStation summary thing, which wasn't working for me as soon as it was everybody else for some reason. But anyway, these were my top 3 games that I played for PlayStation.
Yeah, me too.
These are my top 3 games and not in this order. So, Dan, while I probably agree with you in terms of how the whole podcast is going to go, it ain't what I'm fighting for. So,
hey, we could have had a deadlock if you picked the same as me.
Yeah, let's let this go on for 3 more hours. I love that idea. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because we could sit here all day and be like, well, the music in Final Fantasy elevates the story.
Yeah. Also, the music in Final Fantasy Remake is like absurdly better than Last of Us, but that's fine. Yeah.
Absurdly? I would go
absurdly. Yes.
I don't know. I would say that
it's better, but it's not absurdly better.
I mean, coming from Acoustic Guitar Boy over here, like, of course you're gonna like The Last of Us.
Oh, he's gonna play us a song. Here we go. Let's play us out.
If I ever were to lose lose you.
Oh, that's the heartstrings.
Myself.
Can you sing it like Pearl Jam?
That is nice. We can,
There it
can you
is.
just do the Sephiroth One Winged Angel, please?
Yeah, One Winged Angel. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
It'll
assume
be
there's a lot of
interesting.
like metal guitar in their rock-oriented songs, and like that type of stuff, where you're like, okay, I can't do that.
It'll be interesting when we do shift over to do overall game, and the hope is that Derek will join us for that one as we wrap that up. And I'm okay with extending this. I know I announced it as the last, but I'm okay with doing one more week. This was fun.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see where that all lands, because now that we're rethinking through Final Fantasy VII, I'm like, because I'll be totally transparent. I've got it right now overall as my third favorite game of the year. But now I'm like, was it my third favorite?
Still not
or was
first,
it my second? Like, I don't know. Was it my first? I can't. I'm gonna have to think about this.
I feel like my top two are a lock, and then there's like a disparity between the rest of my list. Almost.
Can we just have a best RPG so it wins first place in something? Please?
Wait, did it not win best music? Did we not crown it that?
Oh, maybe.
I think that was just our favorites.
We did personal picks, and pretty much all of us said that music was the best.
Okay,
So
then it won that. How about that?
There you go.
No, I need something official, Kyle. I need it to be official.
Dan, the community didn't pick it for anything. I can tell
Our
you
community is fucking stupid. All right.
Hey, turn it off. If you're listening from the group, turn it off.
Fall Guys over whatever. Like, I don't even know.
All right, so here are the best stories as picked by our favorite community. Thanks again for voting. Don't listen to Dan. Number 4 was Ghost of Tsushima. Number 3 was Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Ha!
All right.
Number 2, actually the top 2 they were only separated by 2 votes. They were really close. It was Cyberpunk 2077 in second place, and Last of Us Part 2 in first place.
Glad they love Last of Us Part 2.
What a bunch of casuals.
Because you hear this I don't want to call it an echo chamber, but you hear people that do not like the story of Last of Us Part 2 are so freaking loud about it.
Yeah,
right.
But
you're just like, oh, then clearly everybody will hate this. So I'm very happy to hear that people like us and the people that voted also love
I know maybe 2 or 3 friends personally who just hate the second game, but I know 30 who love it. Like, oh, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So like,
the people that hate it are very like, ooh,
stupid.
Don't bring it. It's kind of like Last Jedi. Don't bring it up. Don't bring up Last Jedi online. It's the same thing.
Don't do that.
Just don't bring it up, because people will just be like, oh, like with all their energy.
They'll send death threats to your family for bringing up that movie.
Something wrong with people. Tell you what.
Somebody legitimately said to me on Facebook, Last Jedi is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, you haven't seen a lot of movies then.
Yeah,
no,
I could show you a lot.
I could show you some bad movies.
Let me just review our top 10 that we landed on for best story.
Okay.
And the top 3 were really tough. Well, top 2 were really tough. Number 10 is Haven, and then Tell Me Why, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Marvel's Avengers, Cyberpunk 2077, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and The Last of Us Part 2. A lot of good stories in games this year.
Yeah, big time.
And again, I didn't think 2019 was the strongest in any sense, and this year was a definite step up for stories overall. So, all right, well, that does it for us this week. I know it was another long episode, but the stories this year were compelling, and hopefully our conversation about them was also compelling. And Dan's going to go and make a post about how stupid we are now for not picking.
Yeah. I'm just going to commit seppuku. Is it right? Is that how you pronounce it, seppuku? Just.
Sorry, community. I couldn't fight for Cyberpunk hard. Everybody hates that game, so.
Everybody.
Oh, I tried my hardest.
Just wait till the game of the year. Oh man, I'm gonna be so outvoted in the game of the year.
I'm telling you, it's literally just gonna be this list. We might as well just say this is our game of the year list.
But
I don't think so.
Haven is better than Last of Us.
Tell me why.
If Marvel's Avengers makes our final list, someone's gonna get killed.
No, yeah, they won't. Like half that list won't be in the.
Yeah.
Like right, what I meant was top 3. The top 3 will be basically.
Yes. Yeah. Right. It's gonna be interchangeable. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening this week. You guys, thanks for joining in for this conversation. And next week we'll wrap up with best overall game. You guys have a fantastic week. We'll see you then.
Peace.